Story 1. I live in my boyfriend's house, and his behavior keeps overwhelming me and triggering my anxiety. I'm 28, my boyfriend is 27. I moved in with him about 8 months ago. I'm disabled and have significant sensory issues. That part matters. In general, he tries to respect my needs. My boyfriend is a professional sculptor, and his studio is inside the house. It's placed in such a way that I have to walk through it to reach the bathroom or go outside. There's no other practical location for it. The problem is that his behavior while he's working affects me a lot. He wears headphones, blasts music, dances, sways, mimes singing. He says it helps him stay focused, and I do believe that. The core conflict is that he moves constantly, insisting it shouldn't matter because I can't hear anything. I've tried explaining that because of my sensory issues, it still overloads me, as if I can hear the music even when I don't. He suggested I just avoid that part of the house while he works, except that's where the bathroom is. There's also the issue of him bringing buyers into the house. We agreed he has to warn me ahead of time and ask if I'm okay with it, but he regularly breaks that rule. I come home to a stranger standing in my living room because he didn't expect me back. Having unknown people in the house spikes my anxiety so badly I need days to recover afterward. His solution? Again, just don't go through the studio. Except this is also my home now. Yesterday, actually the whole week had been terrible for me, and I desperately needed peace in my own space. So I hid the key to his studio. I told him I'd give it back in an hour. I just needed a moment of complete calm. I even repeated his own logic back to him, saying maybe he should use another part of the house for a bit. I really was going to return the key after an hour, but he exploded. He said I was going to ruin one of his commissions by keeping him from working immediately. That triggered a severe anxiety episode for me. Here's where I probably messed up. I didn't return the key until evening. He thinks I acted like a jerk. I feel like I just needed a moment of quiet in my own home. What do you think? Update. I admit it now. Hiding his studio key was a terrible thing to do. It was a spiteful move, and I regret it. My boyfriend and I talked through several possible solutions, and none of them involve locking him out of his workspace. A few things people asked in comments. I asked my boyfriend directly if he thinks I'm abusive. He said no. To disabled people who said working through pain made them less patient with others, I'm genuinely sorry that your experience was so harsh. To non-disabled people who lectured me about work and government support, do you have any idea how impossible it is to get disability benefits here? They offered me no resources, no real help, and not even financial support to pay for the medical evaluations their system requires. Their solution was to offer training for jobs nobody would willingly do. For everyone asking about the house layout, I didn't design it. The bathroom is where it is. The studio is where it fits. Nothing I can do. For those saying my sensitivity isn't a disability, it is. Sensory disorders mean I pick up on subtle movements, vibrations, and tiny shifts that others don't even notice. One commenter said it doesn't sound like a major issue because he only dances in the room when I occasionally pass through. But that's not how it works. Even when I'm not in the room, knowing he's doing it keeps me on edge. I feel it in my body. His dancing and constant motion affect me the same way loud music or a crowded event would for anyone else. It drains me, it overstimulates me, and I can't relax until it stops. Living with my parents isn't an option. They dumped me on my sister, and she eventually dumped me somewhere else. I don't have a safety net. A lot of people here judged me, but disability truly means being limited. The less support and stability you have, the more your condition deteriorates and the less independent you can be. Someone suggested that he should only work on days when I can tolerate his movement. Reminder, he financially supports both of us. He works whenever inspiration hits, sometimes 4 hours, sometimes 8 or more at any time of day. I understand how creative work functions, but if I can compromise, he should be able to compromise a bit too. Maybe choose calmer working days when I'm overwhelmed, or shift his schedule slightly if it means I can stay functional. Another commenter said he has a right to bring clients home because the studio is there. True, but when I leave the house, I need a lot of time afterward to feel safe when I return. Coming back to strangers in my home destabilizes me. That's the situation. It's messy, complicated, and neither of us is perfect, but we're trying to figure it out.
When I suddenly come home and find someone else's presence lingering in my space, I can't unwind at all. It completely throws off my sense of safety, and that affects my health more than people think. After moments like that, I avoid leaving the house even more. Sometimes I can still feel a stranger's presence for weeks after they've already left. I get that people without sensory issues believe that's impossible, but think of how someone who survived a break-in feels afterward, like their personal space was invaded and the place they should feel safe suddenly isn't. That's exactly what happens to me. Right now, I'm basically financially trapped. If I could afford to live elsewhere, I probably would have already moved out, but I literally can't work because of my condition. That's why I moved in with him in the first place. It feels like being stuck, no matter how much I want to fix things. I know I should be more patient, but we discussed my needs over and over even before I moved in, and it feels like all those conversations were erased. He's respectful in many everyday ways, but in these bigger issues, it's like he stops hearing me. He keeps saying I'm not stopping him from working, but that's not the point. I simply cannot live alone and have nowhere else to go. Update number 1. I'm 27. My boyfriend is 28. I moved in with him last year after my sister, who I'd been living with, suddenly demanded that I leave. I have a disability, a severe sensory disorder, and I'm unable to work, so moving in with him was the only real option. I also struggle with being alone for extended periods because of my condition. The whole conflict revolves around his sculpture studio. To reach the bathroom or even step outside, I have to walk through the space where he works. He dances constantly while he's sculpting, and he brings clients and buyers into the house. All of that makes me feel unsafe. For most people, it probably sounds like nothing, but his movements drain me physically. Even when I'm not in the room, I feel him dancing, and it overwhelms me to the point of anxiety. Strangers inside the house can trigger a full panic attack and leave me shaken for days. We've talked so many times about what I need to feel safe, but no matter how many conversations we have, nothing changes in the long run. Although in many everyday tasks he's considerate, when it comes to the core issues, he doesn't seem to grasp how serious they are. Recently we argued. I hid the key to a studio because I was absolutely burned out and desperate for at least 1 hour of silence in the place that's supposed to be my home too. I admit it was the wrong choice, but when I'm overwhelmed, I can't think clearly or make rational decisions. I just wanted my boundaries respected. Some people asked what I contribute to the relationship. I contribute emotionally and take care of daily tasks. I don't judge a person's value by their income, and I believed my boyfriend thought the same. I clean, take care of the dog, help with chores, support him emotionally, and have been by his side for a long time. Strangely, I can tolerate crowded places more easily than these situations at home, because when I step outside, I mentally prepare myself for noise and stimuli. At home, I expect peace. On good days, I visit the beach nearby or take small trips to stores. I asked him to work on a schedule so I could predict when he would be in the studio. Structure helps me manage my energy, and sometimes I need him to adjust on difficult days. I would prefer buyers not to come inside the house at all, but if it's unavoidable, they could meet him in the backyard patio next to the studio, something we had agreed on from the beginning. But he still kept bringing buyers inside whenever he thought I wasn't home, and multiple times I came back earlier and ran into them anyway. We also discussed establishing a clear routine so I could prepare myself mentally. I even asked politely, never demanding, if he could simply avoid dancing when I'm home.
People in offices or stores don't dance while working because it distracts others. So I honestly don't think my request is unreasonable, especially considering how badly it affects my health. Update number 2. From the boyfriend. Unique translation. I'm almost 30. My girlfriend is 2. She moved in with me last year. She has a severe sensory disorder, and her move coincided with major financial problems. I could support her, and I truly believed I could adjust to her needs. I've depended on others before, and I had friends who supported me during hard times. I wanted to be that person for her. But over time, the tension between us kept building. Everyday things bothered her because of her sensory issues. I tried adjusting everything: new furniture, reduced noise and smells, restricting my work to one area, avoiding guests, taking hobbies aside. Each time I fixed something, a new issue appeared. Eventually, it felt like even my existence in certain parts of the house irritated her. I started feeling unwelcome in my own home, even though she still relied on my emotional and financial support. My work began to suffer, and resentment started growing in ways I didn't like. I gently encouraged her to seek professional help, but she took it as criticism. We drifted further apart. She became more verbally hostile and withdrawn. I have my own mental health struggles, so all this hit me extremely hard. I battled guilt and depression for months. The breaking point was when I started missing deadlines. It became easier not to come home than to try working in that environment. I've spent years building my career, something that gives me real purpose, and I watched it start to crumble. One day, I came home, walked into her room, and told her I couldn't keep living like this. She broke down, saying she couldn't survive alone. I opened my mouth and said words I regret even now. "Well, then I guess you're screwed." I added that if she can't live alone, can't live with others, and refuses help, then she's doomed. As soon as the words left my mouth, I saw her face: fear, hurt, betrayal. That expression will stay with me forever. I'm staying at a hotel now while figuring out the logistics of separating. She won't speak to me, only texted that what I said traumatized her. I need to know if I crossed a moral line. The relationship is over. I only want to know whether I was wrong in that moment. Someone mentioned a post from months ago that sounded identical to our situation. When I saw it, I realized it was us. Seeing everything written out so plainly hit me harder than I expected. There have been no further updates since then.
Story 2. The Entitled Lady at Starbucks. A woman with an inflated ego decided that using mobile orders was unfair and demanded that I wait in line, even though my drink was already paid for and ready. I'm 28. There's a Starbucks conveniently located near my therapist's office, and over the past few months, I've gotten into the habit of grabbing a sugary drink before each session. Don't judge me, I know those 400-calorie whipped cream-topped sugar bombs aren't real coffee. But that overpriced $10 liquid dessert is my small comfort before diving into emotional self-improvement. Yesterday morning, on my way to therapy, I made a rare smart decision. I ordered ahead through the app to avoid the lunchtime rush. Perfect timing. 10 minutes later, I walked in just as the barista was finishing my pumpkin spice cold brew. She called my name, and I happily stepped forward to grab it. But before I could pick it up, a manicured hand gently landed on my forearm. The hand belonged to a woman who looked about 35, polished, confident, wrapped in a flawless linen suit. Her sleek ponytail, gold jewelry, and designer bag practically screamed, "I'm important." She exuded that unmistakable aura of superiority, chin slightly raised, posture perfect, as if she believed the air around her was more refined than everyone else's. For simplicity, let's call her Miss Entitlement. Her smile looked polite, but her tone was sugary sweet and condescending, like a teacher correcting a clueless child. "That's not yours," she said softly. I frowned, confused. I checked the cup. My name was written right there.
"Oh, sorry, do you have the same name? I think this one's mine. What did you order?" She shook her head, the smile tightening. "No, my name's much longer than that. I ordered a hot soy matcha with 2 pumps of vanilla." "Ah, then this definitely isn't yours," I said. "This one's a pumpkin spice cold brew. Maybe yours is still coming out. You could ask the barista." I reached for my cup again, but her manicured claws tightened around my arm. Her mask slipped, and that fake smile cracked. "I didn't say it was mine. I said it's not yours. I saw you walk in and grab the first drink you saw. You can't do that. You need to wait in line like everyone else." It finally clicked. "Oh, I ordered through the app," I explained. "It's prepaid and ready for pickup. See? I pulled up my confirmation email on my phone and showed her. Order placed 12 minutes ago, paid in full." She barely glanced at it before smacking my hand away, hard enough to leave a red mark. "You can't just walk in and take it," she hissed. "I don't care if it's your drink. It's not fair to everyone else who's waiting." I stood there, stunned. Did this stranger just hit me over a Starbucks order? Around us, maybe 8 people were waiting for their drinks, with another dozen still in line. She honestly thought I should wait behind all of them just to satisfy her warped sense of fairness? I locked eyes with the barista, who looked exhausted, the kind of weary look only years of customer service trauma can create. She sighed and approached us cautiously. "Hi, is there a problem here?" Before I could answer, Miss Entitlement jumped in. "Yes, this girl just walked in, grabbed a random drink and won't wait her turn. Tell her to get back in line." I held up my phone. "That's not true. This is my drink. I ordered it through the app. Here's the confirmation and the name matches the cup. Look." The barista double-checked my phone, glanced at the label, and nodded. "Yes, ma'am, this order is hers. She paid in advance." The entitled woman's jaw tightened. "I don't care if she paid. I've been waiting here like everyone else. She doesn't get special treatment." The barista's tone stayed calm but firm. Her order came through the mobile system earlier, so it was prepared in order of receipt. You're welcome to use the app next time to skip the line, but you can't stop other customers from collecting their drinks or use physical force. Please step aside or I'll have to ask you to leave. Miss Entitlement's face flushed crimson. "No, I want my drink, and she can wait like everyone else. Make my matcha first. I don't care if hers is done." I sighed. "I'm actually running late for an appointment, so can I just take my drink and go? Also, she hit me. There's a red mark on my arm. Maybe call security?" The barista nodded. "Yeah, I think that's best." Up until that moment, Miss Entitlement hadn't raised her voice. She'd been calmly dripping venom with that infuriatingly patronizing tone, like she thought we'd all eventually come to our senses and realize she was right. But when the barista finally handed me my drink, her composure shattered. Her face twisted with pure rage as she turned on the poor employee. "This is ridiculous. Your system is broken. Do you have any idea who I am? You'll regret this. Get your manager now." And that, my friends, is how I got smacked in the hand by a Starbucks Karen because she doesn't understand how mobile orders work.
I didn't do anything wrong. I paid for my drink and I'm not going anywhere. I'll sit here and enjoy it. I have every legal right to do so, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. While the demon continued her tantrum, I glanced at the unflappable barista. She blinked heavily, and for a moment I thought she might actually cry. But then I realized this battle-hardened warrior was simply restraining the urge to roll her eyes. She met my gaze and gave a subtle nod toward the door. After years of surviving the front lines of customer service hell, she could handle this herself. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, letting me pass toward the exit. Just as I reached the door, Beelzebub, the elegant woman, realized her prey was escaping and screeched, "Hey, where do you think you're going? She can't just leave. Someone stop her. I said she has to wait her turn like everyone else." I raised a single finger in her direction and slipped out the back door just as the bell above the entrance jingled. A security guard had arrived. Beelzebub's righteous tirade immediately shifted gears. Now she was shouting that she had every right to be there, that she hadn't done anything wrong, and that she refused to be kicked out. She demanded her money back, a free matcha, and a formal apology, right now. Each sentence was punctuated by the sound of her slapping the counter. Her indignant screeching slowly faded behind the closing door as I walked away, holding my well-earned cold brew like a trophy. I like to imagine the guard didn't have to physically throw her out, though honestly, knowing her, she probably regained her composure, lifted her chin, and swept out like an insulted duchess, muttering something about her lawyer. As I sipped that heavenly pumpkin-spiced madness, I pictured a lonely venti soy matcha latte, extra hot, 2 pumps of vanilla, slowly cooling on the counter. And somewhere a decaffeinated Beelzebub was probably raging in her fancy office. That thought made every sip taste even sweeter. Wow, I didn't expect so many people to actually read this all the way through. I figured I'd take a minute to answer a few common questions that keep popping up in the comments. Yes, I'm Australian, and yes, this really happened here. About the infamous pumpkin-flavored monstrosity, I fully admit I have the world's worst taste in coffee, but drinking something that tastes like a scented candle has always been a weird little dream of mine. And you know what? Shockingly good. Props to America for that one. To those asking why I didn't stand up for myself, I'm a lover, not a fighter, meaning I literally can't fight. If I tried to punch her, I'd probably hurt my own hand more than her face. Plus, I didn't want to get banned from the only Starbucks I ever go to, or, get charged with assault. Why didn't I call the police? I was already late for therapy, and I didn't want to spend hours giving a statement. She didn't really hit me, more like a slap on the wrist that left a red mark for a while. No bruise, nothing worth reporting. Should I have thrown my drink on her? Absolutely not. I'd rather calmly sip my $9 coffee milkshake in peace. Besides, if I'd made a mess, the poor employees would have had to clean it, not her. Oh, and shout out to the guy who literally made a fake account just to send me a death threat because he didn't like my tone and thinks I'm a stuck-up witch. Honestly, kind of flattering. That's a lot of effort for one hate message. If you're reading this, send me your name and address. I promise I won't forward it to the cops. And finally, to everyone who made it this far, thank you. It's nice knowing someone actually reads this stuff. This was fun to write, but it's now 4 a.m. and I'm about to crash. Let's see what chaos tomorrow brings. Before we move on to the next story, I've got a question for you. What would you do in this situation? Actually, it reminded me of something that happened to me recently. It's kind of similar. I'd ordered a shawarma through an app, got a notification that it was ready, but when I arrived, I had no idea where to pick it up. The girl behind the counter was serving someone else, totally silent, and I just stood there waiting, confused. I finally asked, "Hey, can I pick up my shawarma?" And she just didn't answer. Awkward silence. I waited until she finished with the customer, asked again, and she finally handed it to me. I said, "You could have just said something." And she replied, "Can't you see I'm serving someone?" Like, what? I was new there, didn't know how pickup worked, and she couldn't spare 2 words to clarify? Some people just really hate being mildly helpful. Anyway, what do you think? Was she totally right to ignore me? Or was that just bad customer service? Curious to hear your thoughts, because like in the Starbucks story, sometimes these wait-your-turn situations aren't as black and white as they seem. Story 3.
My cousin Julia, who was 27, started a relationship with my ex-boyfriend Louis, 29, about 2 years ago. Before that, I had been with Louis for 3 years. We got together shortly after he finished university, while I was still in my second year of college. Our relationship ended not long after I turned 20. To be honest, that relationship was far from healthy, and I regret that it was my first serious one as an adult. From the outside, everything looked perfect, but behind closed doors, it was the complete opposite. Louis was incredibly insecure and controlling. He limited almost everything I did, from going out with friends to simply talking to other guys. He constantly kept an eye on me, And whenever I didn't act the way he wanted, he would twist things, manipulate me, and make me feel like every issue in the relationship was somehow my fault. I was afraid of losing him, so I tried my best to keep him happy, but no matter what I did, it was never enough. Eventually, he broke things off, saying that things just weren't working, and immediately blocked me everywhere. I tried to reach out and fix things, but he completely disappeared. A couple of months later, I found out through mutual acquaintances that he was already seeing someone else. It made me realize how much time and energy I had wasted. We had no contact for years. Then, when I turned 25, he suddenly unblocked me and sent a simple happy birthday message. I ignored it, especially since I was already in a new relationship by then. Despite my silence, he kept messaging me until I finally blocked him myself. Months passed, and then Julia invited me over to her place. She said she wanted me to meet someone important, her boyfriend. When I arrived, I was completely shocked to see Louis standing there. It turned out he had tried to reconnect with me on my birthday just before he started dating Julia. They met at work, got together, and things quickly became serious. Julia and I had always been extremely close, like best friends, so finding this out hit me incredibly hard. She knew exactly how toxic my relationship with Louis had been and how badly he had treated me. She admitted she understood why I felt uncomfortable, but she still asked me to give him a chance. I honestly tried, but it was too much. I wanted to support her, but Louis had caused me so much pain that I simply couldn't accept it. I explained to Julia as calmly as I could that although I wished her happiness, I couldn't continue having her in my life while she was with him. She was deeply hurt and tried several times to fix things between us, but I couldn't move past it. She insisted he had changed and was a better person now, but I didn't believe that. I had no intention of interfering in her relationship. She was free to do whatever she wanted, but I also had the right to protect my peace and distance myself from both of them. For me, that was necessary. It wasn't an easy decision. Julia wasn't just my cousin, she had always been one of my closest friends, but I chose my mental well-being. From that moment on, our communication almost completely stopped. Over the past 2 years, things between us became cold and distant. When she realized I wasn't going to reconnect, she pulled away as well, which I understood. We still saw each other at family gatherings, but we barely acknowledged each other. Before, we used to spend all our time together, talking and laughing. Now everything had changed, and honestly, I had made peace with that. Everyone lives their own life. Apparently, Julia didn't see it the same way. She took it personally and decided to get back at me. She began spreading negative rumors about me within our family, trying to damage my reputation. Even worse, she and Louis started telling people that I was the reason their relationship had problems. They painted me as someone with no morals, claiming I flirted with other guys right in front of him, and that this supposedly caused his jealousy and controlling behavior. In reality, it was the opposite. He was the one who openly flirted with other women while expecting me to accept it. At the same time, he restricted my interactions with others and gradually isolated me from people I cared about through manipulation. It was painful to hear that they were trying to turn my own family against me, but honestly, I had my own life to focus on, and I didn't let it affect me too much. Most of my relatives didn't believe them anyway, so I chose not to respond. I knew that reacting would only give them what they wanted. I also knew that I could shut everything down easily. One honest conversation with my aunt would have been enough. Even though Julia and I were no longer close, I still had a strong relationship with her mother. My aunt is a federal judge, a strict, principled woman who always stands for what is right. But I chose not to involve her. I knew it would create serious consequences for Julia, especially since she relied on her mother financially. She had recently started her own jewelry business, which, from what I heard, wasn't doing particularly well. I didn't want to escalate things over something so petty, so I stayed silent. At some point, the situation even became a bit absurd. My other cousins would occasionally tell me the latest rumor Julia had come up with, and it almost turned into something I could laugh about. Then, about 6 months ago, Julia and Louis got engaged and set a wedding date.
Shortly after, my parents received an invitation. I did not. And honestly, I was perfectly fine with that. I wasn't expecting to be invited, and even if I had been, there's no way I would have gone after everything that had happened between us, especially considering Lewis was involved.
Story 4. They want us to follow a dress code at school? Nope, I'll wear whatever I want. A little background for context. I've never been a fan of dress codes just for the sake of having them. So when I got into a boarding school that didn't require uniforms, I was thrilled. Honestly, I don't even hate dress codes in principle. My problem is always with how people interpret them. For example, if the rules say socks should be black or blue, 99.9% of people will assume it means navy blue. I'm the kind of person who show up in sky blue socks just to prove a point. Not to make trouble, but simply to share a sly grin with the handful of people who think, well, it does just say blue. It's by way of reminding the bureaucrats who wrote the rules that they aren't as airtight as they think. As my husband likes to say, I've always been a bit of a pain in the neck. I enjoy showing that either or isn't the only option. I've always dressed boldly, loved unusual combinations of fabrics and colors, and if someone had encouraged me to learn sewing back then, I probably would have become a fashion designer. But boarding school is hardly a place full of vibrant creativity. Despite being spirited, I was never a troublemaker. My mom used to describe me as a polite, well-behaved kid who could bend rules into a pretzel without ever technically breaking them. She had to word her rules very carefully whenever she left me home alone, but she also had to be cautious not to give me new ideas in the process. If someone presented a rule as unbreakable, I just had to test it, and if they were pushy or smug about it, I'd find the cleverest way possible to prove them wrong. My mom always believed critical thinking was the real key to success in life. She taught me that if you can analyze a problem and figure out a solution, you don't need to have all the answers memorized, you just need to know how to find them.
Remember, this was a decade before Google and smartphones, so I don't fault modern parents for having a different mindset. Still, I'd raise my own kids with the same philosophy if I had them. She raised me to believe success comes to people who don't just answer apple when someone asks what that round red thing on the table is. Instead, you pick it up, study its weight and texture, notice the sheen on its wax, memorize its smell, because you never know when someone will ask you to describe the underside of an apple when there isn't one around. And when you grow up thinking that way, turning school dress codes inside out becomes kind of fun. So, here's the actual story. At my boarding school, we had 2 dress codes. The first was called the class dress code, and it basically meant we were expected to look like young professionals. Pretty standard stuff: skirts below fingertip length for girls, shirts and ties for boys, and all the usual details. The second set was for downtime, called city dress. That was for when we hung out in the student lounge or went off campus. It was more relaxed, but still had enough restrictions to prevent the girls from wearing anything too revealing or the boys from dressing like slobs in ripped clothes. Now, I had these suede knee-high fringe boots. Actually, I had 2 pairs, one black and one brown. They were the warmest, most comfortable boots I'd ever owned, even before Uggs became a thing. My mom and I had fought over those boots for years, so it was a huge personal victory when she let me bring them to school. One day, a teacher pulled me aside and told me the faculty had been discussing my boots and decided they didn't fit the class dress code. But I read the rules, I argued. There's nothing in there about boots like these. I know, she admitted, but we've decided they don't fit the image we want. But the color matches, I know. The material's fine too, suede is allowed. Yes, the rules don't mention height. Riding boots are permitted, right? That's true. So why then? I demanded. I honestly can't tell if I felt more angry or hurt. Probably both. This teacher was someone I respected, someone who had always been kind to me, and I immediately understood why they sent her to talk to me instead of someone else, because I wasn't the type to throw a tantrum or cause a scene. I was the type to plan my revenge quietly. All right then, I said calmly, and walked away. That night, I studied the dress code rules word for word, line by line. I read through every single sentence of that dress code over and over again. I even said the rules out loud, picked up every piece of clothing listed, and examined it like I was some alien who only had this manual and a piece of fabric to figure out why humans wear these things. I had to admit it was a strict code, but they made 2 big mistakes. First, nowhere did it say where each piece of clothing had to be worn. Second, there was no mention that you even had to look presentable. The rules only specified colors and lengths: skirts below fingertip length, socks above the ankle, sleeves covering elbows, and so on. Shoes had to be in muted tones, black, brown, or other earthy shades like my fringe boots, but nowhere did it say you couldn't show up and say elf shoes. Of course, elf shoes wouldn't exactly scream professional, but still, loophole. I went to bed that night mad as hell, my head buzzing with mischievous ideas. I debated with myself for a long time whether I should even go through with it, but eventually I decided if I still felt the same way in the morning, I'd start phase 1. The next day, I woke up just as annoyed, and on my way to breakfast, I mentally made a list of the biggest clowns in my class. In the cafeteria, I found a couple of them and told them, you know, the handbook is very specific about how ties must be knotted, Windsor, single, or double, and if it's a bow tie, it has to be tied in the classic way, but nowhere does it say ties have to be worn on the neck. The rule just says they must be properly tied. I suggested they read it carefully that evening and decide for themselves what to do with that little loophole. The following day, ties were everywhere. On wrists, wrapped around glasses, tied across foreheads, looped around ankles, knees, thighs, even wrapped around fists like someone was stopping a nosebleed. If you could tie a Windsor knot on some body part, one of the boys in our school had done it. I was ridiculously proud of myself. Phase 1 was a total success. The teachers were irritated, of course, though plenty of students found it hilarious, until math class. One boy came in without a visible tie. He was the one who always wore a bow tie. The teacher looked down at him sternly and said, "I know you all decided to play games with ties today. I think we've been patient enough, but you do know the rules say you have to be wearing one." He grinned, looked her in the eye, and replied, "I am, you just can't see it." The room exploded with laughter. Maybe he really did tie it around his ankle under his pants or around his elbow under the blazer. Who knows? But to the rest of us, he instantly became the guy who wore his tie on his junk. By the end of the day, I was considered the legend who had found the loophole, and he was the legend who took it to, well, the most infamous possible place. The very next morning, the school email newsletter had an announcement. The rules had been updated. Ties must now be worn only on the neck. Fun times were officially over. But phase 2, oh, that was the real challenge. I'd been eyeing the most ridiculous pair of boots I'd ever seen at the mall. They were silver with holographic rainbow circles all over, had a 5-centimeter platform, a chunky 10-centimeter heel, and lace-up fronts that came just above the ankle. Utterly outrageous. I knew there was no way I could get away with wearing them to class, but for city dress, I wanted them so bad. After 9 years of uniforms, I was finally starting to enjoy fashion. I'd been saving money for months and would sneak into that store whenever I could just to look at them. For a while, I tried to convince myself they were too expensive, but once they banned my favorite suede fringe boots, my desire for those wild rainbow boots only grew stronger. Eventually, I scraped together enough money. It felt like fate. That weekend, I practically skipped to the mall, grinning from ear to ear, only to find they were sold out in my size. I nearly burst into tears. But then, right next to them, I saw the same design in black patent leather. Until that moment, I'd dismissed the black pair as boring, especially compared to the silver ones. But here's the thing. Our dress code had a whole paragraph about patent leather shoes. They were allowed, but only if worn with pants. Why? Because of that absurd old belief that shiny shoes could reflect a girl's underwear if she wore a skirt.
So my rainbow boots? Absolutely banned. But their black patent leather sisters with silver accents? Perfectly legal. Silver detailing was allowed since shoelace eyelets could be made of metal. And the 5-centimeter platform and 10-centimeter heel, also fine. There wasn't even a height restriction for heels in the dress code. I guess the school assumed no high school girl would willingly spend an entire day in stilettos. And unlike the shiny rainbow boots, their black patent leather version looked less like party footwear and more like ankle boots a gummer would wear. Funny thing is, I never would have even glanced at those black boots if it weren't for my newly discovered obsession with the dress code. The outfit started with these bright orange polyester pants covered in tiny gray-green amorphous specks, something that vaguely resembled a microscopic giraffe print. The green was barely visible. From a distance, it just looked like some random texture over the orange. The clash between the two colors was so aggressive that the pattern literally seemed to vibrate, making you dizzy and even a little nauseous if you stared too long. By sheer luck, I'd also managed to grab an orange terry sweater in exactly the same shade. The result? From the waist up, I looked like a rejected Sesame Street character, while from the waist down, I resembled a disco-era misfit. Did I mention the pants were slightly flared? So on Monday, I walked into class looking like someone who'd been thrown off the set of Saturday Night Fever. My new platform boots had these heavy wooden heels that clumped so loudly they echoed through the entire building. Suddenly, I was towering a good 10 centimeters over everyone else, more noticeable in the hallways, and even rivaling some teachers in terms of sheer presence. I caught a few of them throwing sideways glances at my boots, and I started keeping mental notes on which staff members apparently had it out for my suede knee-highs. It was obvious who found my appearance ridiculous. But I didn't stop there. It turned into a personal mission to curate the most hideous outfits my imagination could come up with. I didn't care how I looked anymore. I just wanted to make sure each piece still technically complied with the dress code. Even the teachers admitted my boots met the written requirements. They just didn't like them. I'd put effort into following their rules, and suddenly it wasn't good enough, simply because my choices weren't to their taste. So fine. If they didn't like my boots, I'd wear ugly boots every single day, forcing them to stare at outfits that nobody in their right mind would find appealing. And what could they do? Tell me daily that my clothes were wrong while failing to explain how? By their own admission, nothing I wore actually broke the rules, and I wasn't about to start breaking them. That's not my style.
Living in a dorm had its perks. Girls shared clothes freely. So as long as you were willing to lend your stuff too, you essentially had access to 30 wardrobes just in our block alone. My own clothes had been carefully coordinated, but once you started mixing them with other people's, the results became gloriously absurd. Like when my roommate's loud neon blouse, which she only ever wore with a black skirt, ended up paired with another girl's skirt in a clashing wild print. I wore it specifically because the colors screamed at each other. Still, not against the rules. Those scandalous slut boots, I only ever paired them with pants. I raided every thrift store, vintage shop, and second-hand place in town. And since our city had no shortage of hippies, the selection was fantastic. I put together 3-piece suits with ties that made me look so boyish that at a parent-teacher meeting, one of the teachers actually asked my mom if I was gay. Apparently, dressing badly meant you were automatically gay. I'd braid my bangs into a thin plait, clip a heavy earring to the end so it dangled, and then swing it back and forth over my desk or book, only during the lessons of the teachers I suspected of discriminating against my boots. Basically, I did everything I could to annoy them with my appearance. At that infamous parent-teacher conference, they asked my mom to talk to me about my clothes. She blinked and asked if I was breaking any rules. They explained the boots situation. My mom laughed and told them there was nothing they could do. If there's one thing her daughter hated, it was being punished for a rule she didn't know existed, or worse, one that had never even been written down. If you want to make a new rule right now to stop her, go ahead. By tomorrow, she won't be doing this anymore. I promise you won't see those boots again. But the way she'll see it, you've taken away something she liked for no good reason. That's punishment, whether you call it that or not. And if she feels punished unfairly, she punishes back. Simple as that. My advice, drop it and spend the summer rewriting your handbook. Otherwise, you'll burn through paper trying to keep up with all the loopholes she's going to find. My daughter lives for finding loopholes. Honestly, I regret giving her so many puzzle books when she was little. Hearing this, the teachers admitted the only real reason they were ignoring my new boots was this. When the teachers saw how I reacted to the suede boots ban, some of them honestly seemed afraid to imagine what I might show up with next if they tried to outlaw the second pair as well. But being the well-behaved student that I actually was, I never wore those suede boots again. And after that, no one ever gave me grief about my outfits. Well, except for one time when my skirt ended up way too short. That one wasn't even intentional. The following year, I didn't return to that school, but for completely unrelated reasons, so I never found out if they rewrote any of their rules. To this day, I've kept those black boots. They're still tucked away somewhere, and every time I stumble across them at the bottom of a box, I can't help but smile. I even held on to a t-shirt from that era. It is, without exaggeration, the single ugliest piece of clothing I own, but I just can't throw it out. Every time I see it in my closet, I start laughing, remembering the whole saga. Somewhere, I've even got photos of me in that ridiculous fuzzy orange getup. If I ever dig them out, I'll definitely share them. Back then, I was having the time of my life breaking their so-called dress code, and it felt amazing. So here's the takeaway. Whatever problems you're facing, try flipping them inside out. Look at them from a different angle. Twist them around. Play with them. You never know where the cracks might be hiding. And of course, this is also just another wonderful story about how amazing my mom was. She always had my back. Though, if I'm honest, I suspect she was also quietly angry that the teachers hated our boots. Because if the school rules were clearly written, she could have been wearing them all along. Instead, those awesome boots just sat gathering dust in my locker. I miss you, Mom. Edit. No, I didn't end up becoming a lawyer. Life just went in a different direction. These days, I work for myself, building a business in a field I'm genuinely passionate about. I enjoy almost every minute of it. I'm happy and I'm grateful that I get to love what I do. One last note. This whole story took place in the mid-90s.
Story 5. Dad gave me the best 18th birthday gift, but my jealous stepmom and her daughter burned my passport a day before the trip. Hi everyone. I turned 18 just a few days ago, and for my birthday, my dad surprised me with something incredible. My very first international trip to India, just the two of us. This trip was supposed to be something really special for so many reasons. My mom passed away when I was only 6. To cope with the loss, my dad and I used to watch Indian movies together all the time. They were colorful, uplifting, and helped brighten even the darkest days. That's how I fell in love with Indian culture. My mom loved those films too. She even had a collection of traditional Indian outfits, even though she never actually got to visit India herself. Before she died, she and my dad promised we'd go there as a family one day. Sadly, she passed away from a sudden brain aneurysm in her sleep before we could make that dream come true. She was only 32. After her death, it was just me and Dad. Watching movies together became our little ritual to keep her memory alive and stay close. Over the years, it made our bond stronger than ever. I know Mom would be proud of us today. That's why India has always held such a deep emotional meaning for both of us. It's not just a trip, it's a promise finally coming true. When Dad revealed at my birthday party that he'd booked the trip, I was ecstatic. I couldn't stop smiling. But not everyone was happy for me. My stepmom, Susan, and her daughter, Nadia, 17, looked like someone had slapped them. And sure enough, after the guests left, I overheard them arguing with my dad. From what I caught, Susan thought he should have postponed the trip so we could all go as a family. Honestly, I was relieved that it would just be the two of us. I don't get along with Susan or Nadia at all, and past family vacations with them were a nightmare. I couldn't imagine them ruining this one too, especially since it meant so much to me emotionally. Luckily, they had their own reasons not to join anyway. Nadia had her final exams and upcoming graduation, and Susan was tied up with an important project at work. Still, I can't help but feel Dad timed things perfectly so it could be just us, even if he'll never admit it. Susan and Nadia came into my life about 5 years ago. At first, everything seemed fine. They acted friendly enough when Dad was just dating Susan. But once he married her 2 years ago, things shifted. Their attitude toward me became cold and strange for no reason I could figure out. I hadn't done anything differently, yet suddenly I was treated like an outsider in my own home. And now, well, let's just say their jealousy hit a whole new level. Things were already bad with my stepmom and stepsister, but what they did before my trip crossed every line. I was never close with Susan or Nadia, but at least in the beginning our relationship was civil and polite. That all changed after Dad married Susan. Suddenly, she started treating me like dirt, and Nadia copied every move her mother made. They'd talk down to me, make nasty little remarks, and act cruel, but only when Dad wasn't around. The moment he walked into the room, they'd flip the switch and turn into sweet, smiling angels. It was so fake it made my skin crawl. Eventually, I realized I needed to tell Dad what was going on. We sat down for a family talk, and at first, Susan and Nadia denied everything. Luckily, I had recorded one of our earlier conversations where they were openly horrible to me. With evidence on the table, they couldn't lie anymore. So instead of denying, they switched to emotional manipulation. They both burst into tears and told Dad they only acted that way because they felt like I hadn't accepted them as family, which was total nonsense. I did see them as family. It was them who treated me like garbage. Yet somehow they expected me to keep being nice to them while they showed me zero respect. Dad was confused and torn. Susan was the first woman he'd really cared for since Mom, and I knew he didn't want to lose that relationship so easily. He asked all of us to try harder to get along. For his sake, I agreed to keep things civil. After that, their behavior shifted again. Instead of being nice in front of Dad and cruel behind his back, they just chose to completely ignore me whenever he wasn't around. It was like I didn't exist. Honestly, I preferred it that way. At least they weren't actively tormenting me. For Dad's sake, we kept up the performance of being one happy family, and that carried on for about a year. Fast forward to just a few days ago, the morning after my birthday, Dad and I had breakfast together and I pulled him aside. I asked him straight out if Susan and Nadia were upset about not joining us on the India trip. He admitted they were, but also reminded me how much this trip meant to us, especially with it falling so close to Mom's death anniversary. He wanted this to be our special time together, just father and daughter. He promised he'd smooth things over with them later. That was fine by me. Honestly, vacations with Susan and Nadia were torture.
Dad and I are explorers. We love walking around, sightseeing, soaking up every bit of culture. They, on the other hand, prefer to sit in the hotel and complain if we're even a little late for dinner. To me, that's not a vacation. That's being trapped. India was supposed to be different. India was supposed to be ours. I didn't think there was anything wrong with that, especially since Susan and Nadia had taken their own little trips together in the past without us. The only real difference was that ours was longer and farther away, 10 days overseas instead of just a weekend somewhere nearby, but still it felt completely fair. Dad told me not to stress, to focus on packing and getting ready. He promised he'd deal with Susan and Nadia after we got back, so I did exactly that. For the past 2 days, I was walking on air, too excited to care about their drama. Yesterday, I finished packing everything, double-checked my documents, and tucked my passport into my bag so it would be ready. Our flight was scheduled today. But now, I don't even know if we're going anymore, because Susan and Nadia crossed a line so insane I still can't believe it. They burned my passport. Yes, burned it. Not lost, not misplaced. They literally destroyed it. I found out just a few hours ago. It was around 6 p.m. yesterday when I was organizing paperwork and noticed it was missing from my bag. By 2 a.m., the truth came out. They had actually set it on fire. They burned my passport before my trip. My dad's revenge was brutal. When I went through my bag to double-check everything before our flight, I realized my passport wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe I misplaced it, so I tore the entire house apart. Drawers, shelves, even the laundry baskets. 45 minutes later, I was sweating, panicking, and close to tears. It was just gone. That's when Susan and Nadia waltzed into my room with these fake sweet voices and asked, "Lose something?" I immediately felt something was off, but in desperation, I admitted I couldn't find my passport anywhere. That's when Susan tossed something on my bed. It was my passport, or at least what was left of it. Half burned, charred along the edges, completely ruined. She smirked and asked, "Was this what you were looking for?" I froze. My brain couldn't even process it at first. When the shock finally wore off, I decided I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching me break down. I calmly set the ruined passport aside, stood up, shut the door in their faces, rocked it, and then I collapsed into tears. Dad wasn't home. He was out picking up clothes for the trip. I texted him everything that happened, even attached a photo of the burned passport. Within 20 minutes, I heard him storming into the house. His voice shook the walls as he screamed at Susan and Nadia, calling them picos and ordered them out. He said he'd already made one mistake when he ignored the first time they mistreated me, and he wasn't about to repeat it just because he once loved Susan. Of course, they immediately tried to fake cry and blame me. Their story was that I'd supposedly left a lit cigarette on my dresser, and that's how my passport caught fire. Which is insane. I don't even smoke. At that point, I came downstairs because I couldn't let them spin lies like that. Dad looked at me and said I was just in time because he had something planned. I assumed he was about to call the police, but no, he went into his office and came back with a stack of papers. Nadia's face went pale the second she saw them. Then, without saying a word, Dad ripped the documents in half right in front of Susan.
Turns out those papers were for Nadia's student loan. She needed Dad to co-sign so she could pay for college, since Susan hadn't saved a dime for her. Dad had been ready to help. Not anymore. That was his revenge. My passport for her college dream. Fair trade, honestly. Within an hour, Susan and Nadia were gone. They begged, pleaded, even got on their knees, but Dad didn't budge. Now, since the moment they left, they've been spamming me with texts, Nadia especially. She keeps begging me to convince Dad to reconsider, promising she'll do anything to make up for it. She claims they never knew Dad was going to co-sign her loan, and that they just lashed out because they felt excluded. I finally replied once. I reminded them that they've gone on plenty of mother-daughter trips without us, so why is it unfair when Dad and I wanted one trip alone, especially for my 18th birthday and in memory of my late mom? The truth is, Nadia still has her biological dad, even if he lives in another state and doesn't have custody. She still sees him sometimes. Me? My mom has been gone for years. That trip was supposed to be in her honor.
and Susan and Nadia couldn't even let me have that. So no, I don't feel bad. What happened to Nadia was karma. Burning my passport was cruel. Losing Dad's support for her education, that was justice. Update. And now, honestly, Nadia has lost every right to ask me for anything, not even forgiveness. Still, she keeps messaging me, begging. I even tried blocking her, but for some reason I hesitated. Maybe because part of me wondered if it was a little unfair to plan a trip just for me and Dad, leaving her and Susan behind. Their getaways usually last only 2 to 3 days, somewhere nearby, while ours was supposed to be 10 full days in India. That's a big difference. So here I am, asking, am I really the bad guy for wanting one international trip with my dad without my stepmother and stepsister? Well, before I continue, I'll just say what I think the answer is. No, not at all. This situation seems clear. I wasn't wrong. I wanted time with my dad, especially on my 18th birthday, and especially since it was in honor of my late mom. What Susan and Nadia did was cruel and manipulative, and it says more about them than about me. My dad, he's the one I feel bad for. He fell for a woman who clearly didn't respect me, and by extension, didn't really love him the way she should have. Update. A lot of people asked why we didn't call the cops after they destroyed my passport. The truth, it didn't even cross my mind at first. I was in shock, panicking, crying, and honestly, what would it have done? They would have just claimed it was an accident, dragged it out forever, and nothing would change. We didn't want that mess. Others also asked why I wasn't in college yet. I graduated high school last year and decided to take a gap year to figure myself out. I worked a few jobs, interned in journalism, and gained some experience in the field I want to study. Now I'm applying to schools, and luckily my grandparents have already promised to cover my tuition, so my dad doesn't have to stress about me. Nadia's situation was completely different, which is why Dad was planning to co-sign her student loan. But after what happened, well, you already know how that ended. As for our trip, today was supposed to be our flight to India. Instead, we stayed home and watched old movies we used to love. It wasn't the same, but honestly, it helped. I finally blocked both Susan and Nadia, and I don't regret it. They don't deserve my sympathy. You were all right. I was only second-guessing myself because I've been missing my mom and was in a very emotional state. But they betrayed me for no reason, and whatever happens to them now, they absolutely brought on themselves. Update. It's been 4 days since my last post, and today Dad came home from work with big news. He filed divorce. Afterward, we finally had the conversation we'd been avoiding for far too long. He admitted that he'd been selfish. He loved Susan and tried to convince himself it would work out, even when her behavior, and Nadia's, clearly proved otherwise. Instead of trying to repair things with me, they simply shut me out completely. That's not family. That's not love. Dad told me he finally realized he'd been clinging to something toxic, and it was damaging both of us. He deserved better. I deserved better. Maybe he did love her, but it was obvious she didn't love him enough to even tolerate me, and that's not the kind of woman he should spend his life with. Update. The reason Susan never truly accepted me was simple. She could never see me as part of her family. Deep down, she probably knew that for Dad, I would always come first, and that neither she nor Nadia could ever replace me. That jealousy and insecurity made her bitter, and eventually it poisoned everything. Dad may never fully understand why their behavior shifted so dramatically, because before the wedding they treated me kindly, but the moment the vows were said, it was like they became different people overnight. Dad admitted he ignored the signs, hoping things would somehow settle, but the damage was already done. He told me he's finished pretending. We're not a happy family, and there's no point in acting like one. That same day, after meeting with his lawyer, he filed for divorce. Later, he apologized for everything I had to endure because of his choices, and we just hugged. Some might call him a flawed father, but to me, he's the best dad I could ever ask for. Sure, he made mistakes and sometimes thought only of himself, but every mistake was outweighed by 10 good things he did for me. I love him, and I always will. Update. A few days later, it became official. Susan was served divorce papers. Dad came home early from work and locked himself in his office. I could hear him shouting into the phone, and it had me worried.
Hours later, he finally explained. Susan had called, threatening to ruin him if he went through with the divorce. She promised to spread lies, throw accusations, and destroy his reputation. The first time, she caught him off guard at work, but once he was home, he recorded the call. When she realized he had proof, she flipped out, accused him of blackmail, and turned the whole thing into chaos. Dad didn't back down. He told her if she tried to drag his name through the mud, he'd make sure she'd regret it. From her voice, he could tell she was shaken. He said the process will start soon, and once it's finalized, he and I will finally take that trip to India together. He promised me. For now, we just hope she doesn't create more problems, but honestly, with the evidence I have, including the destroyed passport, she knows she's fighting a losing battle. Update. Hi again, quick update because I'm super busy. The divorce is officially finalized, and the outcome? Honestly, Dad hit the jackpot. Susan walked away with nothing. No alimony, no settlement, no ridiculous child support she tried to claim out of nowhere. She fought dirty, but it didn't work. So now it's just us. We kept everything, and for the first time in a long time, life feels calm. I already have my new passport, and Dad and I have started planning our India trip again. This time, it's really happening. I can't even describe how excited I am. More importantly, I'm genuinely happy now. Thank you all for your support along the way.
Story 6.
My parents are filming my life. My parents and I travel around the country in an RV. They post our lives online, and I hate them a little more for it every single day. When I was around 7, my parents decided to live in a camper and travel across the US. My dad works remotely, and my mom is a lifestyle blogger. She's not super famous, but popular enough that sometimes people recognize us in public. So, a camera has been pointed at me for as long as I can remember. For privacy reasons, I'm writing this from a throwaway account. I've already had more unwanted attention than most people see in a lifetime, and I'm exhausted from it. I sleep on a tiny bunk bed I outgrew years ago. The top bunk is the only place where I can keep my personal things. I don't even have a room, just a curtain. And honestly, thank God I'm an only child, or I'd have to share even that little bit of space. I was homeschooled most of my life, and when I hit high school, I insisted on switching to an online program. I'm 18 now, and I don't have a single real-life friend. We never stay anywhere longer than a month. I don't have a job either. It's impossible when you never live in one place. I could try online work, but that still wouldn't give me the independence to move out. I've talked to my parents about our lifestyle more times than I can count, but they're so deep in denial they truly believe this nomad life is the best possible way to live. They act like I'm some pet they can drag along on their adventures. I hate traveling. I can't stand the heat, the bugs, or the endless hiking. I'm sick of sleeping in different parking lots every week. I can't wait for the day I can finally escape, away from their sunrise hikes and the ever-present camera shoved in my face. Yes, I've technically seen the whole country, but does that mean I'm not allowed to want a normal life? To go to college? To have friends? It feels like I'm asking for too much. Comments and my thoughts. People often tell me how lucky I am to live this way, but honestly, it's lonely beyond words. Someone once asked if I had any other relatives I could stay with. Sadly, I thought I didn't. My current plan is to find some kind of online work, save as much money as I can, and eventually rent a small apartment. I've also been talking to an online friend about possibly becoming roommates someday to share expenses. College might be my best shot at getting out, even though it's expensive. It would at least be a real step toward freedom and maybe a chance to finally have a life of my own. Still, I'm nervous. Being homeschooled left me far behind academically, and high school was already hard enough. Honestly, I'm just proud I managed to graduate from online school at all, instead of continuing full homeschooling. Someone joked that if I started making content about escaping my hipster parents, I'd probably go viral. And yes, the thought crossed my mind. Not for fame, but to raise awareness about what it's like to have your childhood turned into content. But I decided against it for a few reasons. First, it wouldn't be sustainable. People would lose interest after the story was told. Second, I'd need a stable, safe environment
before putting myself out there publicly, and I don't have that yet. But most importantly, my life has already been on display without my consent. The only thing that's ever been truly mine is my privacy, and I don't want to give that up too. First update. Hi again. About a week ago, I posted about my awful experience living in an RV with my parents for nearly 10 years. It hasn't been long since then, but so much has changed. After the post blew up, I received hundreds of messages, people offering advice, sharing resources, and some even offering help in person, a few of which were questionable, to be honest, but most were kind, genuine people who just wanted to help, and I truly appreciate it. To be honest, it was overwhelming and I couldn't respond to everyone. But even if I didn't reply, I read everything. One question that kept coming up was, do you have any relatives you could stay with? I used to think the answer was no. My dad's side is non-existent, and my mom completely cut ties with her family years ago. She never talked about them. I didn't even know if they were alive. All I had was my mom's rare maiden name and her birthplace. Turns out that was enough to start with. It's ironic. I've always kind of hated the internet because I never had a choice in being online. My life was public without my consent. But for once, I'm genuinely grateful it exists. With some effort, I managed to find information about my mom's family, including my grandmother's old Facebook profile. It took a while to work up the courage, but eventually I messaged her. I told her about my mom, about myself, and about my situation. I won't share the details of why my mom cut contact with her family. That's not my story to tell. But my grandmother was shocked to learn she had a granddaughter she never knew existed. She was even more horrified to find out how I'd been raised. Through her, I discovered that I have an aunt and an uncle. My grandmother told them everything, and now I'm in touch with all three of them. They all want to help me get out, and since I'm legally an adult now, it's finally possible. I won't reveal too many details for safety reasons, but I've already arranged to move in with my aunt. She lives in a big city on the West Coast, a place full of opportunities for college and work. And yes, I'm planning to enroll in college soon, which feels surreal but exciting. My uncle has kids of his own, but my aunt lives alone and offered me her spare room for as long as I need it. She even bought my train ticket herself. I already have enough money to make it to the station. It still feels strange to say it out loud, but I'm talking to my family now. Real family. I'm still figuring out how or if I should tell my parents. My mom doesn't even know where her relatives live, so even if I said who I'm going to, she wouldn't know where that is. Some people suggested that if I decide to leave without telling them directly, I should leave a note or a short video explaining that I left willingly, just in case they make it sound like I was taken. That's probably what I'll do. Funny, isn't it? After all those years of being filmed, I might end up recording a video from myself, the only one that actually matters. As for my mom's content, I've been keeping quiet whenever the camera's on. Thankfully, neither of them has noticed anything unusual yet. Before I end this, I want to make one thing clear. Most of the people who reached out were kind and helpful, but if you tried to guess who I am, luckily commenters called them out and they deleted their posts. Some even messaged me privately trying to figure it out. I get the curiosity, I do, but I made this post anonymously for a reason. I've had enough attention to last a lifetime, and I'm done with it. So please, even if you think you figured out who I am, don't share it. Let me keep what's left of my privacy. Long story short, I finally have a plan to leave and a safe place to go. If someone had told me 2 weeks ago that not only would I have a way out, but that I'd reconnect with family I didn't even know existed, I never would have believed them.
Final update. Hi everyone. I'm not planning to post another update for now, but I wanted to calm those who were worried about me. I'm doing fine. Truly, thank you all for your kindness and support. To answer some of the concerns people had, yes, I'm aware I don't really know my mom's side of the family yet, and I promise I'm being careful. I understand why my mom doesn't talk to them, and honestly, after seeing the documents and hearing their side, I believe them. They showed me actual court papers and messages that explained everything. My train isn't today or tomorrow,
so before leaving, I'm still keeping in touch with them. They've been genuinely caring and trustworthy so far. My aunt, the one I'll be living with, is incredibly sweet. We already found a few shared interests, and she makes me feel welcome. Oh, and I don't think I mentioned this before. I'm applying to college. For the first time, it feels possible. Hopefully, I'll be living in a dorm, so I won't stay with my aunt for long, just until things settle down. Some people told me not to record a goodbye video for my parents, and you're right, it would only be used for their content. I was angry and hurt when I thought about doing it, but I've realized it's not worth it. Maybe one day I'll talk to them face to face, but not now. Someone gave a really smart piece of advice to contact the local police non-emergency line once I move, just to let them know where I'll be staying and ask for a welfare check after a few weeks. That's actually a brilliant idea. Thank you for that suggestion. Second update. Hi again. It's been some time, and I wanted to share how things turned out. In my previous post, I said I'd gotten in touch with my relatives on my mom's side and might have a place to go. Well, I did it. I'm safe now, away from my parents, and we no longer speak. My aunt is an absolute angel, kind, understanding, and full of warmth. My grandmother and uncle are just as amazing. When I first arrived, my aunt and grandma took me on a mini shopping trip. Clothes, room decor, everything I could possibly need. And yes, I finally have my own room. My uncle introduced me to my cousins. He has a son and a daughter about my age. We've already become good friends. We hang out, laugh, and just live like normal teens. My aunt helps me research nearby colleges, but keeps reminding me not to rush things, that I can take my time, and that her home will always be open to me. She's someone I've grown to deeply admire. The more time we spend together, the more I realize how much we have in common. I'm endlessly grateful for the love and acceptance they've shown me. For the first time in my life, I'm discovering who I really am. I changed my hair color and cut, picked out a new nickname, and that's what I go by now. My cousin helps me with makeup and shares her favorite music. She calls herself a cringe-free pop fan, but honestly, she's awesome. I even made a private Instagram, only 5 followers, and I plan to keep it that way. For once, I feel like a normal teenager. I look in the mirror and genuinely like who I see. I didn't realize how uncomfortable I'd been in my own skin before, always trying to take care of everyone else, but never myself. Now, I'm finally free to breathe, to grow, to just be. I've started seeing a therapist, and she suggested writing this update as a way to close the past chapter of my life, to let go, and to move forward. This will be my last update. I want to live my life, enjoy my future, and keep my personal space. Many people ask me to share more about my childhood or everything that happened, but I'm not ready. This is my story, and I decide what to share. For the first time, I have control over who knows what about me, and I'm not giving that up. I'm truly happy now. I'm safe, I'm making plans, thinking about my future, and discovering who I am beyond the image my parents created. Thank you all for your kindness, advice, and compassion. Goodbye, and thank you for helping me get here. Story 7.
Dad gave me the best 18th birthday gift, but my jealous stepmom and her daughter burned my passport a day before the trip. Hi everyone, I turned 18 just a few days ago, and for my birthday, my dad surprised me with something incredible, my very first international trip to India, just the two of us. This trip was supposed to be something really special for so many reasons. My mom passed away when I was only 6. To cope with the loss, my dad and I used to watch Indian movies together all the time. They were colorful, uplifting, and helped brighten even the darkest days. That's how I fell in love with Indian culture. My mom loved those films too. She even had a collection of traditional Indian outfits, even though she never actually got to visit India herself. Before she died, she and my dad promised we'd go there as a family one day. Sadly, she passed away from a sudden brain aneurysm in her sleep before we could make that dream come true. She was only 32. After her death, it was just me and Dad. Watching movies together became our little ritual to keep her memory alive and stay close. Over the years, it made our bond stronger than ever. I know Mom would be proud of us today. That's why India has always held such a deep emotional meaning for both of us. It's not just a trip, it's a promise finally coming true. When Dad revealed at my birthday party that he'd booked the trip, I was ecstatic. I couldn't stop smiling. But not everyone was happy for me. My stepmom, Susan, and her daughter, Nadia, 17, looked like someone had slapped them. And sure enough, after the guests left, I overheard them arguing with my dad. From what I caught, Susan thought he should have postponed the trip so we could all go as a family. Honestly, I was relieved that it would just be the two of us. I don't get along with Susan or Nadia at all, and past family vacations with them were a nightmare. I couldn't imagine them ruining this one too, especially since it meant so much to me emotionally. Luckily, they had their own reasons not to join anyway. Nadia had her final exams and upcoming graduation, and Susan was tied up with an important project at work. Still, I can't help but feel Dad timed things perfectly so it could be just us, even if he'll never admit it. Susan and Nadia came into my life about 5 years ago. At first, everything seemed fine. They acted friendly enough when Dad was just dating Susan. But once he married her 2 years ago, things shifted. Their attitude toward me became cold and strange for no reason I could figure out. I hadn't done anything differently, yet suddenly I was treated like an outsider in my own home. And now, well, let's just say their jealousy hit a whole new level. Things were already bad with my stepmom and stepsister, but what they did before my trip crossed every line. I was never close with Susan or Nadia, but at least in the beginning our relationship was civil and polite. That all changed after Dad married Susan. Suddenly, she started treating me like dirt, and Nadia copied every move her mother made. They'd talk down to me, make nasty little remarks, and act cruel, but only when Dad wasn't around. The moment he walked into the room, they'd flip the switch and turn into sweet, smiling angels. It was so fake it made my skin crawl. Eventually, I realized I needed to tell Dad what was going on. We sat down for a family talk, and at first, Susan and Nadia denied everything. Luckily, I had recorded one of our earlier conversations where they were openly horrible to me. With evidence on the table, they couldn't lie anymore. So instead of denying, they switched to emotional manipulation. They both burst into tears and told Dad they only acted that way because they felt like I hadn't accepted them as family, which was total nonsense. I did see them as family. It was them who treated me like garbage. Yet somehow they expected me to keep being nice to them while they showed me zero respect. Dad was confused and torn. Susan was the first woman he'd really cared for since Mom, and I knew he didn't want to lose that relationship so easily. He asked all of us to try harder to get along. For his sake, I agreed to keep things civil. After that, their behavior shifted again. Instead of being nice in front of Dad and cruel behind his back, they just chose to completely ignore me whenever he wasn't around. It was like I didn't exist. Honestly, I preferred it that way. At least they weren't actively tormenting me. For Dad's sake, we kept up the performance of being one happy family, and that carried on for about a year. Fast forward to just a few days ago, the morning after my birthday, Dad and I had breakfast together and I pulled him aside. I asked him straight out if Susan and Nadia were upset about not joining us on the India trip. He admitted they were, but also reminded me how much this trip meant to us, especially with it falling so close to Mom's death anniversary. He wanted this to be our special time together, just father and daughter. He promised he'd smooth things over with them later. That was fine by me. Honestly, vacations with Susan and Nadia were torture. Dad and I are explorers. We love walking around, sightseeing, soaking up every bit of culture. They, on the other hand, prefer to sit in the hotel and complain if we're even a little late for dinner. To me, that's not a vacation. That's being trapped. India was supposed to be different. India was supposed to be ours. I didn't think there was anything wrong with that, especially since Susan and Nadia had taken their own little trips together in the past without us. The only real difference was that ours was longer and farther away.
Turns out those papers were for Nadia's student loan. She needed Dad to co-sign so she could pay for college, since Susan hadn't saved a dime for her. Dad had been ready to help. Not anymore. That was his revenge. My passport for her college dream. Fair trade, honestly. Within an hour, Susan and Nadia were gone. They begged, pleaded, even got on their knees, but Dad didn't budge. Now, since the moment they left, they've been spamming me with texts, Nadia especially. She keeps begging me to convince Dad to reconsider, promising she'll do anything to make up for it. She claims they never knew Dad was going to co-sign her loan, and that they just lashed out because they felt excluded. I finally replied once. I reminded them that they've gone on plenty of mother-daughter trips without us, so why is it unfair when Dad and I wanted one trip alone, especially for my 18th birthday and in memory of my late mom? The truth is, Nadia still has her biological dad, even if he lives in another state and doesn't have custody. She still sees him sometimes. Me? My mom has been gone for years. That trip was supposed to be in her honor, and Susan and Nadia couldn't even let me have that. So no, I don't feel bad. What happened to Nadia was karma. Burning my passport was cruel. Losing Dad's support for her education, that was justice. Update. And now, honestly, Nadia has lost every right to ask me for anything, not even forgiveness. Still, she keeps messaging me, begging. I even tried blocking her, but for some reason I hesitated. Maybe because part of me wondered if it was a little unfair to plan a trip just for me and Dad, leaving her and Susan behind. Their getaways usually last only 2 to 3 days, somewhere nearby, while ours was supposed to be 10 full days in India. That's a big difference. So here I am, asking, am I really the bad guy for wanting one international trip with my dad without my stepmother and stepsister? Well, before I continue, I'll just say what I think the answer is. No, not at all. This situation seems clear. I wasn't wrong. I wanted time with my dad, especially on my 18th birthday, and especially since it was in honor of my late mom. What Susan and Nadia did was cruel and manipulative, and it says more about them than about me. My dad, he's the one I feel bad for. He fell for a woman who clearly didn't respect me, and by extension, didn't really love him the way she should have. Update. A lot of people asked why we didn't call the cops after they destroyed my passport. The truth, it didn't even cross my mind at first. I was in shock, panicking, crying, and honestly, what would it have done? They would have just claimed it was an accident, dragged it out forever, and nothing would change. We didn't want that mess. Others also asked why I wasn't in college yet. I graduated high school last year and decided to take a gap year to figure myself out. I worked a few jobs, interned in journalism, and gained some experience in the field I want to study. Now I'm applying to schools, and luckily my grandparents have already promised to cover my tuition, so my dad doesn't have to stress about me. Nadia's situation was completely different, which is why Dad was planning to co-sign her student loan. But after what happened, well, you already know how that ended. As for our trip, today was supposed to be our flight to India. Instead, we stayed home and watched old movies we used to love. It wasn't the same, but honestly, it helped. I finally blocked both Susan and Nadia, and I don't regret it. They don't deserve my sympathy. You were all right. I was only second-guessing myself because I've been missing my mom and was in a very emotional state. But they betrayed me for no reason, and whatever happens to them now, they absolutely brought on themselves. Update. It's been 4 days since my last post, and today Dad came home from work with big news. He filed divorce. Afterward, we finally had the conversation we'd been avoiding for far too long. He admitted that he'd been selfish. He loved Susan and tried to convince himself it would work out, even when her behavior, and Nadia's, clearly proved otherwise. Instead of trying to repair things with me, they simply shut me out completely. That's not family. That's not love. Dad told me he finally realized he'd been clinging to something toxic, and it was damaging both of us. He deserved better. I deserved better. Maybe he did love her, but it was obvious she didn't love him enough to even tolerate me, and that's not the kind of woman he should spend his life with. Update. The reason Susan never truly accepted me was simple. She could never see me as part of her family. Deep down, she probably knew that for Dad, I would always come first, and that neither she nor Nadia could ever replace me. That jealousy and insecurity made her bitter, and eventually it poisoned everything.
Dad may never fully understand why their behavior shifted so dramatically, because before the wedding, they treated me kindly, but the moment the vows were said, it was like they became different people overnight. Dad admitted he ignored the
Story 8. I stopped a kidnapping while delivering pizza. I work as a pizza delivery driver, and one night turned into one of the strangest and most intense experiences of my life. It was a crazy shift, non-stop orders, driving all over the city without a single real break. I had been drinking water all evening because of the heat, and of course, I didn't make time to use the restroom. By the time I got close to my next delivery, the urge hit me like a truck. Luckily, I was nearly at the customer's address. I thought I'd drop the pizza off quickly, then deal with the problem. But when I pulled up, things immediately felt wrong. I'd been to that neighborhood before, even that house, but this time all the windows were dark, not even the glow of a TV inside. The entire street was eerily quiet. This was a college area, so sure, not many students were around in July, but still, somebody had ordered this pizza. I wasn't about to step out of the car and walk up to a pitch-black house. It was around 9:30 p.m., still hot outside, even though the sun had set hours ago. My car's AC barely worked, and the pizza boxes weren't helping. I called the number on the order. At first, all I heard was heavy, uneven breathing, then a shaky, "Hello?" I tried to keep it professional. "Hey, I'm outside with your pizza, but it doesn't look like anyone's home." The voice gasped, I'm not there. Not yet." Annoyed, and very distracted by my full bladder, I snapped back harsher than I should have. "Well, if you're not here, I'll have to cancel the order. You were supposed to pay cash. Next time, plan better." Almost immediately, I regretted it. The voice grew clearer. It was a young woman, maybe in her early 20s. Out of breath, she explained, "Oh my God, I was running home. I almost didn't hear you. I just switched off my AirPods. Is this better? I lost track of time at work, but I knew you'd be coming, so I'm literally sprinting back right now. Please, please don't leave. I'm starving and I don't have a car. Just 5 minutes, I promise." Hearing her voice jogged my memory. I had delivered here before, and she was always polite. Now I felt like a jerk for barking at her. I told her it was fine, that I'd wait, and hung up. But the bathroom situation was reaching emergency levels. No trees, no hidden corners. And like an idiot, I had tossed out an empty bottle earlier. The only option was the row of bushes by her front walkway. No lights outside, no one around, my car parked across the street, and thankfully, my job didn't require a uniform. I figured I'd be quick and no one would notice. I hurried to the thickest bush right near the front door, unzipped, and finally started to relieve myself. But almost immediately, I realized something was off. The sound wasn't right. It wasn't hitting dirt. It was solid. Before I could process it, a muffled male voice barked, "What the hell?" And a man suddenly burst out of the bush. He ran past me, wiping himself off. I must have hit him directly. My eyes adjusted enough to make out his shape, build, and clothes, but he disappeared before I could react. A minute later, I heard the screech of tires down the street. That's when it clicked. That girl had said she was running home, alone, at night, and some guy had been hiding in her bushes by the door. If I hadn't been desperate enough to relieve myself right there, I don't even want to think what might have happened. I was so stunned that I didn't even zip up. I just stood there, frozen, trying to process what the hell had just happened. The reality of it was so terrifying that my brain refused to accept it, desperately searching for some logical explanation that would make it all seem normal. I wondered maybe the bushes led to a backyard and only looked like they were up against the house. Maybe they covered an open basement window or something. But then that voice in my head screamed, "Dude, that guy was wearing a hoodie in 90-degree Fahrenheit. That is not normal. He's bad news. You're in real danger." The thought that I'd been just a couple of steps away from some man hiding in the bushes outside a young woman's home at night sent a chill down my spine. My fight-or-flight response completely broke down because instead of running, my dumb brain decided to do the absolute worst thing possible. I walked closer to investigate. There had to be a reasonable explanation, right?
Some non-creepy reason for a guy in a hoodie to be crouched in the dark shrubs? I circled around, turned on my phone flashlight, and aimed it behind the bushes. But if something looks scary in the dark, trust me, shining a beam of light on it can make it 100 times worse. That's when I saw it. A bag. It was an old, beat-up drawstring backpack, a little damp from, well, yeah, I'd accidentally splashed it. Still in a fog of shock, I reached for it, thinking, okay, maybe this explains it. Maybe he's homeless. Maybe he was just resting here. But when I opened the bag, reality hit me like a truck. Inside were a sharp hunting knife, a roll of duct tape, and a bottle of pills. At that moment, every illusion I'd been clinging to shattered. My body flipped into full survival mode. Adrenaline and instinct kicked in like never before. Gone was the frozen, confused idiot. I became laser-focused on one single goal: get to the car. I dropped the bag like it was on fire, bolted across the street, jumped into my car, and floored it before the door had even shut. I didn't stop until I hit a red light several blocks away. Only then did I pull over in the lot of a 24-hour pharmacy, shaking uncontrollably, trying to catch my breath. When I finally calmed down enough to think clearly, the first question hit me. Do I call the cops first, or the girl who lives there? I mulled it over for what felt like 10 seconds, but when I glanced at the clock, an entire hour had passed. My brain was still scrambled. Eventually, I told myself, all right, I'm safe in my locked car with the engine running. If anything goes down, I can drive away. But she might not know what's waiting for her. So I started dialing her number. Then a horrifying thought stopped me cold. What if there is no girl? Sure, I was 90% sure I'd delivered here before, but what if I was mistaken? What if the girl on the phone was just bait, a setup to lure me into a trap? Every pizza delivery driver alive has heard of the evil genius case. I replayed the phone call in my head. She'd been panting, said she wasn't home, begged me not to leave. The whole thing was weird, way too weird. Nope, can't risk it. Call the cops first. So I dialed 911. The operator was calm, professional, thank God, because by then I was completely falling apart. I kept rambling, tripping over my words, trying to explain 3 different points at once. You have to get there before the girl arrives. He wasn't waiting for me, he was waiting for her. But then again, maybe she doesn't even exist. But I did talk to someone on the phone, so if she is real, you need to find her because she has no idea what's happening. And listen, I only checked part of the bushes. There could be more than one of them. Oh, and you'll know the guy when you see him because, I peed all over him. Not on purpose, just... Long story. Finally, the dispatcher told me to stop talking and just stay on the line. And then, her number popped up on my phone. Incoming call. I couldn't answer without disconnecting 911, so I ignored it. Seconds later, a text came through. Hey, I'm here, but I don't see you. I blurted it out to the operator, and they said the officers were just a couple of minutes away from the address. But my stomach twisted with guilt. Rationally, I knew the odds of her being some kind of scammer were tiny. Much more likely, she was a real girl walking straight into a nightmare. I unmuted the line and said, I'm going back. I can't just sit here. They definitely didn't like that answer, but I had already turned the car around. My heart was pounding out of my chest, and the whole way I was muttering under my breath, shh, fuck, fuck, fuck. And then I saw her. Story 9.
My ex-wife is trying to win me back by using our daughters. Doesn't sound too serious at first, right? Yeah, it's what I thought too. But as much as I'd love to tell my ex to go to hell and never see her again, we share 2 daughters and joint custody. So completely cutting her out of my life just isn't possible, not unless I walk away from my kids too, which I'd never do. We got married young, 20 years old, dating for 3 years before that. Our daughters were born during the first year of marriage. After the second birth, my ex had complications that made it difficult for her to get pregnant again. I didn't care. I was just grateful she made it through safely, and that we already had 2 beautiful little girls to love. The marriage lasted 9 years. It ended when I filed for divorce after discovering she cheated.
I have zero tolerance for betrayal. I refuse to make myself miserable for something I didn't cause. Maybe it sounds strange, but my love for her died the exact moment I learned about her affair in detail. So no, this isn't some story about a man who can't let go. I moved on 7 years ago. Hell, I don't even hate her. I just don't care. Whatever happens in her life means nothing to me, unless it directly affects our kids. The problem is, I seem to be the only one who's actually moved on. My ex, her family, and even our daughters keep trying to push us back together, even though I've made it crystal clear that I have absolutely no desire to ever be with her again. Maybe the fact that I stayed single for years after the divorce gave them false hope. But honestly, I just wasn't ready to jump into anything new. My daughters were my top priority. Plus, I had my own emotional mess to sort through after her betrayal, which, thankfully, I managed with help from friends, family, and therapy. My relationship with my daughters is great. We don't fight, we don't yell, and they're not rebellious or dramatic. Everything's been peaceful, except for one issue. They know their mother cheated. She told them herself about 3 years ago. Since then, I think she's been feeding them her version of events. I've asked her countless times to stop. It doesn't help anyone, least of all the girls. But instead of stopping, she just got sneakier about it. Since the divorce, she hasn't dated anyone, or even tried. I guess she thinks that makes her look noble. But honestly, I find it insulting. She could cheat on me while we were married, but now she's suddenly living like a saint? Whatever. That's her problem, not mine. For years, I could ignore the little comments my daughters made about their mom, how good she looks now, how happy she seems, the photos she just happened to show them where she's clearly dressed up to impress. But lately, things have gotten worse. Why? Because I started seeing someone. Clemence isn't the first woman I've dated since the divorce, but this is by far the most serious relationship I've had since it ended. She's 8 years older than me. We actually knew each other for about 4 years before anything romantic happened. We shared a hobby, became close friends, and eventually realized there was more between us. And yes, I genuinely love her. It even surprised me when I realized it. I honestly thought my ex's betrayal had broken something inside me, that I'd never be able to love again the way I once did. At first, my daughters didn't know much about Clemence. Just like my previous relationships, I kept things private. But eventually, they started coming home earlier than expected and began seeing her around. Nothing inappropriate ever happened, but soon came the sighs, the cold looks, and the questions. What is she doing here? Don't you think it's unfair to Mom? It was like they thought I was dating just to spite their mother. I sat them down for a serious talk, explained everything over and over, but it just didn't sink in. They're still clinging to some childish fantasy where their parents get back together. Clemence, thankfully, is incredibly understanding. She doesn't take it personally and keeps saying give them time. But honestly, I'm not convinced time will fix this. It hasn't yet, so why would it now? I've run out of ideas. That's why I'm asking for advice. Is there any way, any possible approach to help my daughters finally understand that I will never get back with their mother?
Sounds harmless enough, right? Well, not really. As much as I'd love to tell my ex to get lost and never see her again, we share 2 daughters and have joint custody. So, cutting her out of my life completely isn't an option, unless I'm willing to lose my kids too. We got married young, both 20, after dating for 3 years. Our twin girls were born during the first year of marriage. My ex had some complications after that, which made future pregnancies difficult. At the time, I didn't care about that at all. I was just grateful she survived everything safely, and that we already had 2 beautiful little girls we adored. Our marriage lasted 9 years. It ended when I filed for divorce after discovering she had cheated. I have zero tolerance for that kind of betrayal, and saw no reason to keep suffering for something that wasn't my fault. Some might find it strange, but every ounce of love I had for her died the moment I learned the full story of her affair. So no, this isn't some sad tale about a man who can't move on. I did,
7 years ago. Hell, I don't even hate her anymore. I just couldn't care less what happens in her life as long as it doesn't affect our daughters. The real problem is that I'm the only one who truly moved on. My ex, her family, and even our daughters keep trying to reunite us, despite me being very clear that I have zero interest in ever being with her again. Maybe the fact that I didn't date anyone for years after the divorce gave them false hope. But honestly, I wasn't about to jump into another relationship that fast, especially when I had 2 girls to raise. They were my priority. Eventually, with the help of friends, family, and therapy, I got my mental health back on track. My relationship with my daughters has always been great. No fights, no yelling, no teenage rebellion, yet. They're smart, kind, and we've always been close. But there's one big problem. They know their mother cheated on me because she told them about 3 years ago. Since then, I'm pretty sure she's been feeding them a twisted version of events. I've asked her countless times to stop dragging them into our adult mess, but she doesn't listen. She hasn't dated anyone since the divorce, hasn't even slept with anyone apparently. She thinks that makes her look noble. Personally, I find it insulting. When we were married, she was sleeping with someone else, and now she suddenly can live without intimacy for 7 years? Whatever, that's her problem. For years, I brushed off the occasional mentions of her looks or the photos my daughter showed me where she clearly dressed up just to make an impression. But things changed after I started dating again. My girlfriend Clemence isn't my first relationship since the divorce, but she's definitely the most serious one. She's 8 years younger than me, and we'd known each other for 4 years before we started dating. It grew naturally, from friendship into something deeper. And honestly, I love her. I didn't expect that. I thought my ex's betrayal had broken something inside me, that I'd never be able to love again. Turns out I was wrong. At first, my daughters didn't know much about my relationship with Clemens. Then they started showing up at my house earlier than scheduled, sometimes finding her there. We were never inappropriate, just living our normal lives. But soon came the questions, what is she doing here? Or, that's not fair to mom. It's like they genuinely believe I'm seeing someone just to hurt their mother. I've had long, honest talks with them, but they just don't seem to get it. They can't let go of the fantasy that their parents might reunite someday. Thankfully, Clemence is understanding. She says the girls just need time. Oh, I'm not sure that will help. It hasn't so far. So yeah, I came online looking for advice. Maybe someone out there knows how to help my daughters finally understand that no matter what happens, I'm never going back to their mother. When I try explaining that you can't be faithful to someone you're no longer with, they just ignore it. I've begged my ex countless times to stop manipulating the girls and keep them out of our adult issues, but she doesn't care. At one point, I even considered going to court to get full custody, but was advised it probably backfired. The truth is, my daughters know why we divorced. They know their mother cheated. I usually don't recommend telling kids something like that, but mine are old enough now. The problem is that their understanding of the story is based entirely on her version, filled with excuses and self-pity. A year ago, I finally tried explaining my side, only to find out she had already told them years before, when they were around 13. They know what she did, but they can't comprehend it emotionally. To them, their mother has always been loving and caring. They can't imagine her cold and distant like she was during the affair. Back then, she completely shut me out, not just physically, but emotionally. She stopped doing little things, morning kisses before work, random hugs, shared jokes, all gone. I realized something was off and eventually, with a close friend's help, uncovered the truth. She had been giving all that affection to someone else. I'll never forgive that. My daughters don't understand why, and honestly, I don't want them to. No child should ever have to carry that kind of pain. So when they talk about regret, forgiveness, or getting back together, I just can't relate. Where was all that love when it mattered? Update. It's been a while since my original post. A lot has changed. My daughters actually found that post by accident. I had no idea they were even on that site. One day, I came home from work and found them both in tears. They ran to me,
hugged me, and begged me to forgive them. Apparently, they'd read one of my comments and learned the full extent of their mother's affair and how deeply it hurt me back then. We went through a lot of therapy together. Honestly, I never blamed them. They were just kids, manipulated by their mother, who used their love as a weapon. After a few months of family therapy, the psychologist told us we no longer needed weekly sessions, just occasional check-ins. My daughters and I became closer than ever. Their relationship with their mom, though, took a hit, understandably. I told them not to dwell on her mistakes. I've long since made peace with what she did. That's also something we worked through in therapy. I eventually had a serious talk with my ex, made it absolutely clear that the getting back together nonsense needed to stop. Whether she listened or not, I don't know, but at least she stopped bothering the girls with it. Or maybe they've learned to tune her out. Either way, as long as my daughters are okay, I don't care what she's doing. As things settled, Clements and my daughter started bonding, really bonding. They started talking to her more, even asking her for advice on girl stuff. The first time I saw that, I nearly cried. Not long after, Clements and the girls surprised me. They organized a private dinner, just the three of us. Then Clements proposed to me. Yeah, she beat me to it. I was stunned, but happier than I had been in years. Not just because of her proposal, but because my daughters helped her plan it. We had a small, intimate ceremony with close friends and family, and now we're expecting a baby. My daughters can't wait to become big sisters, and I honestly can't wait to watch them spoil their new sibling rotten.
Story 10.
I'm refusing to go on a family vacation because my sister expects me to look after her kids again. I even had to move out of my parents' house earlier because I was constantly being pulled into babysitting my 3 nieces and nephews. Despite that, last year I still ended up acting like a helper, or even the main nanny during our family trip. For example, last summer we went to the beach. My parents paid for my hotel, but I had to share a room with 3 loud boys because my sister and her husband wanted their own space. I was promised I'd have time for myself, but instead I spent almost all my free time taking care of the kids. When I complained, everyone reminded me that I wasn't paying for the trip. In the end, we only did one thing I actually wanted, visiting an art gallery. I enjoy that kind of thing on vacation, but the kids were bored. This year, my parents planned another similar trip in June and expected everything to be the same. I refused. I told them I would drive separately and pay for my own hotel so I could have my own space. They were surprised and brought up the cost, but I explained that I have a stable job and can afford it. That led to arguments, but I explained my reasons clearly. I want to enjoy a vacation like an adult, not spend it like a babysitter. My parents told my sister, and she immediately called me, yelling that I would ruin everything if I didn't help her with the kids. I finally snapped and reminded her how last year I was dragged into her chaos, barely able to do anything for myself, and even made to feel guilty for wanting something simple like visiting an art gallery. I told her I deserve a proper vacation too. Now she refuses to talk to me, and my parents are still trying to convince me to go along just to avoid conflict. I'm standing my ground, even though the pressure is growing. I understand it won't be easy for them without help, but I don't think I'm wrong for setting boundaries. Let me know what you think. Am I right, or is my sister justified since she has 3 kids to take care of? Update 1. About an hour after I posted, my sister somehow found it. She wasn't just angry at me, she was upset that people in the comments didn't support her. She had a meltdown talking about how hard it is to raise triplets and insisting that I, as someone young and independent, should help her. I didn't change my position, and now I'm expecting a call from my parents since she already reached out to them. Update 2. After work, I can add more details. Things have mostly settled now. My parents saw my post and were shocked by how many people responded. Yes, they were upset that I posted it, but I told them if they had listened to me earlier, it wouldn't have been necessary. I was tired of always being the one expected to sacrifice for family peace. Eventually, my parents confronted my sister. The trip was canceled anyway since nothing had been booked yet, but now they're arguing with her.
She blames me, and the kids are disappointed because they won't go to the beach. She even called me during lunch and implied that I don't have my own life, so I should help her. I recorded that conversation and showed it to my parents, which made them even more upset with her. A few days later, they told me they would never force me to babysit again and admitted that last year's situation was unfair. Now they're angry at my sister for saying I should help just because I have no life. Meanwhile, her husband has stepped back from the chaos and spends most of his time at work. Update 3. My parents have apologized, but my sister hasn't yet. At least as of a week ago, she refused. This whole situation basically exposed deeper issues in our family. For context, my parents and sister got used to me helping with her triplets. I lived with my parents until I was 22 to save money during college. I had a scholarship, but staying at home made things easier, and I'm grateful for that. But after graduating, everyone assumed I had unlimited free time. That's when they convinced me to go on that family trip. During that trip, I was responsible for 3 6-year-old boys and even had to share a room with them. They didn't listen to me at all. I even had to call their mom multiple times just to get them to behave. Yet, whenever I wanted to do something for myself, I was treated like the problem. If my plans didn't match the rest of the family, they were ignored. It felt completely unfair. I was part of the family, but my opinion didn't matter. After that trip, I spoke honestly with my parents, and they admitted they were wrong. By the end of the summer, I moved out without telling anyone in advance. I had already secured a good job after an internship, and moving closer to work reduced my commute significantly. My sister was especially unhappy because she lost her regular free babysitter, but she still tried to pressure me into helping. Sometimes I gave in when she offered things like pizza, and it became expected. When my parents suggested another trip to the same place, I immediately recognized it would be the same situation again. If I accepted their offer to pay, I'd be stuck babysitting. So I told them calmly I would go independently and pay for myself. That's when everything escalated. My parents started pleading, and my sister tried to pressure me emotionally, but I refused. After I posted about it, my family initially turned against me. My parents even called me while reading my post. I asked them if anything I wrote was untrue. They tried to say it was exaggerated, but I pointed out specific details that proved otherwise. I told them to look at the comments, even though there were too many to read fully. The number kept growing quickly, which shocked them and made them reconsider their actions. My sister also tried calling me repeatedly during work. I finally answered at lunch. She complained that my post turned her parents against me. After their argument, my parents canceled the trip. At first, they tried to blame me for it, but later they admitted their mistake. They acknowledged it wasn't fair to treat me like free childcare, especially since I no longer lived with them. They also tried to justify things by reminding me I lived with them for free during college, but I pointed out that wasn't a valid argument. When my sister finally spoke to me, she revealed her mindset clearly, saying I had no life and should spend my weekends helping her because she was too tired to manage everything. She's a stay-at-home mom. Her husband earns well, and they live comfortably, but her kids are not my responsibility. She got angry and hung up. I had recorded the call and later showed it to my parents, which made them even more upset with her. A few days later, her husband stepped in and made her apologize. It was clear he hadn't realized the full situation before. He even believed she had been paying me for babysitting after I moved out. In reality, she barely covered anything, sometimes just gave money for pizza. It turned out she hadn't paid me properly for months. When this came up, her husband was furious, and she had to pay me everything she owed from her savings. After that, he apologized to me for not stepping in earlier and said they would hire a proper babysitter from now on.
A few days later, we had a family meeting at my parents' house. Everyone apologized to me again. After that, my parents confirmed that the family vacation was still happening. And yes, I'm still going on my own terms, driving separately and paying for my own hotel room. I made it clear that if my sister even tries to push childcare onto me again, I'll switch hotels. I told her directly, and she promised it wouldn't happen. So, if there's no update a month after the trip, it means everything went fine. Update 4. My sister called me demanding that I delete my posts. She had realized how widely the story had spread and couldn't handle the backlash anymore. She asked if people were still commenting, and I told her honestly, yes, around 10 new comments a day, and most of them are criticizing her. She broke down crying and begged me to take everything down. I refused. I told her those posts are the only reason she can't treat me like garbage anymore. She acted like my entire life should revolve around hers. She didn't even properly pay me for babysitting, kept money for herself, and turned me into a full-time nanny during last year's vacation. It's no surprise people reacted negatively. When I mentioned I had even made a video about the situation, she completely lost it and hung up. Later, my parents called, asking me to delete the posts too. I refused again and explained that none of this would have happened if they had supported me earlier. I told them clearly, I'm not her servant, nanny, or handyman. I'm her brother, and I'm an adult. Eventually, they backed off, but still asked me to remove everything. I told them I wouldn't unless they started standing up for me more often. My sister created this situation with her entitlement, and now she has to deal with it. I also made it clear I have my own life, my career, and I want to move forward. If they keep enabling her, it will only make things worse. The only way to stop this is to end the entire situation. My posts are anonymous, and I have every right to speak about what happened. My mom ended up crying, my dad stayed quiet, and I told them their emotions wouldn't change my decision. They know what needs to be done. Stop supporting her behavior. Soon after, my sister called again, furious because our parents told her they wouldn't step in anymore and that she had to handle things herself. They also told her to treat me better. I responded sarcastically, and when I hung up, she was crying again. Later, her husband called me to hear my side. He wasn't happy that I kept posting, but after I explained everything, he said he would talk to her again. Hopefully, that would calm things down. The vacation was still planned for the end of June. I had already booked my room on a completely different floor, far from my family. I made it clear, unless it was a planned family activity, I would spend my time however I wanted, visiting galleries, trying local food, and actually enjoying myself. The trip itself had ups and downs. The good part, my parents no longer tried to push me into babysitting. My sister did try, though. She even attempted to find out which room I was staying in, but failed. Before arriving, I had already informed the hotel staff not to give out any information about me. They confirmed it. At the day of departure, I left earlier than everyone else. I knew they wouldn't be ready on time, so I left at 9 a.m., even though check-in was later. My parents were annoyed because they had planned a group breakfast, but I told them I hadn't been informed. At the hotel, I double-checked with the staff about my privacy. Later, I found out my family had indeed tried to get my room number, but the staff refused. My sister tried to pressure them, but her husband stopped her. When we met later, everything seemed normal. At one point during an outing, my sister asked me to watch the kids. I immediately refused. I knew her trick. Just a minute would turn into an hour. Her husband backed me up and told her to stop. She started crying, saying she needed a break, but he reminded her he was tired too. My mom gave me a look, so I went up to her and said clearly if she expected me to babysit, I would leave the vacation immediately.
That ended the discussion. After that, neither my mom nor my sister tried again. At the hotel, I avoided sharing elevators and kept distance. My room was far away, and I made sure no one followed me. The next day, I spent most of my time alone, only joining them for specific plans, like visiting the aquarium.
She called us, screaming that we destroyed her family. Her exact words to my husband were, "I worked for years to keep this family together. I forgave everyone for everything they ever did. And this is how you repay me? By letting some bitch tear us apart?" So yeah, that bridge is gone. Ted's coping the best he can. He's in therapy too, working through his guilt and grief. He keeps apologizing, even though I know none of this was his fault. He said that what his best friend and brother did to me will haunt him for a long time. We've been reading some of your comments together. He's thankful for everyone who sees him as someone trying to make amends, but he says he hasn't earned forgiveness yet. He believes it'll take years to truly make things right. He even told me that he'd understand if I wanted a divorce, that he couldn't live with himself knowing what his family did to me. But I told him no, I still love him deeply, and I know he isn't responsible for what happened. We'll see how therapy goes, for both of us. Where's Ash now? He's still under psychiatric supervision. He's asked to see Ted, but Ted refuses. He did send him a letter, though. I don't know what's in it, and I don't want to. Ted assured me that I'll never have to see Ash again. Once doctors deem it safe, he'll be transferred to the West Coast, where the rest of the family can deal with him. Brother number 3 is currently overseeing his condition and agrees it's best to keep him far away from us. Ted still discusses the medical updates with him, but I stay out of it, and that's perfectly fine by me. Following your advice, Ted and I took a break. I quit one of my jobs and switched to remote work for the other. We've been staying at my dad's seaside apartment while Ted's on leave. His boss has been very understanding. It's mid-January now, the gloomy weather, but the ocean view helps calm my mind. Being far from all that madness has been healing. I also changed my phone number so Ted's family can't reach me anymore. And honestly, it's the best decision I've made. It's just me, Ted, and our cat here now. I've filed for a restraining order against Ash. I'm not sure what legal steps brother number 1 is taking for his daughter, but I know he made her delete her social media accounts. If there are further actions, that's their call. We're moving soon. Not sure where yet, but both of us know that our current house no longer feels like home. Over the next few weeks, we'll start looking for a new place closer to my family. As for what was in the locked guest bathroom, sorry to disappoint, but there were no body parts or horror movie scenes. It was just more of the same stuff they'd already found in the main bathroom. I don't think Ash is some serial killer in the making. He's just a severely disturbed man with self-destructive coping mechanisms and deeply unhealthy attachments. One commenter suggested he might have deep-rooted hatred or distorted view of women, and honestly, I agree. All of his disturbing behavior was directed at women, me, his niece, and even his cat, Sunny. But again, I'm not a professional. How am I doing? It depends on the day. Some days are easier, some aren't. I have therapy sessions every other day. And thank you to those who suggested bringing white noise or headphones into the bathroom. It's actually helped a lot. My sisters take turns visiting me, so I'm rarely alone for long. Many of you asked what Ash's childhood was like, what could have caused this. These are Ted's words. When you grow up with 8 older brothers, you become an easy target for criticism, comparisons, and impossible expectations. When the older ones needed somewhere to unload their frustration, Ash was the weakest, the one they picked on. I'm not excusing anything, but there were things even I couldn't protect him from. Now, as an adult, I see how messed up it all was, and so do my brothers. We each have our own demons to fight. We didn't have a supportive family. Everything was swept under the rug instead of being addressed. It left us broken, unable to tell right from wrong. Some of us got better, thanks to our partners, jobs, and experience, but we still have a long way to go. We can't undo the past. All we can do is acknowledge it and try to be better tomorrow.
Why didn't anyone check on his cat sooner? Because there was no reason to suspect anything. Sunny was never a very social cat, so during lockdown video call,
Update 3, unique and translated version. Hey everyone, it's been about 2 months since all this chaos started. During that time, I've gotten tons of messages and comments asking for an update, most of them kind and supportive. Of course, there were a few nasty ones too, but at this point, I've made peace with the fact that it's just part of internet culture. First off, sorry it took me so long to write this. I know many of you are curious about what's been happening with Ted's family, but I really needed time to process everything. Anyway, here's another miserable little piece of the puzzle so you can finally get some closure. So, Ted asked me to move out for a while. He's been struggling a lot emotionally and said my presence was only making things harder for him. He's drowning in guilt, and dealing with all those skeletons from his family's closet is too heavy for anyone. We're not officially divorced, but we're not looking for a new place together either. We're still in the process of selling our old house. Ted's living there, and I've been staying with my parents. I honestly don't know what will happen once the house is sold, or what he really wants, but I promised to give him space. He did allow me to post this update, though, because despite some hateful messages, most of you have been incredibly kind and supportive. Now, as promised, here's the updated version of Ted's family tree, including the sisters. Brother number 1, doctor with a military background, married, 3 kids. Brother number 2, surgeon, married, has 2 dogs and a bearded dragon. Brother number 3, engineer, engaged, 1 dog. Brother number 4, teacher and researcher, married, 1 child. Sister number 1, deceased. Brother number 5, works in IT, married, not many details. Brother number 6, doctor, single, open to dating. Brother number 7, chef or businessman, married, 1 kid. Brother number 8, car salesman, married, 3 kids and some fish. Sister number 2 and 3, both deceased. Brother number 9, married, possibly divorced now, 1 cat. Brother number 10, Ash. Now, about the sisters, I only mentioned them this time because, well, the family story is already insane, and this just adds another layer. I didn't include them earlier because Ted never talks about them. For him, they've simply never existed. All 3 sisters were born and passed away before Ted was even conceived, so in his mind, he only has brothers. You guys came up with some wild theories, some surprisingly close to the truth, some totally unhinged. But honestly, given what we know about this family, a bit of insanity seems to run in their blood. Anyway, no, the sisters weren't murdered. Sister number 2 and 3 were twins who died shortly after birth due to a developmental defect. Their lungs never fully formed. That's all Ted knows. I don't talk to his family anymore, so I can't confirm more details. Sister number 1 died in a motorcycle accident. One of the brothers was driving, underage and drunk. I didn't mention this before because it wasn't my story to tell. It had nothing to do with my situation, and I still believe people deserve privacy, so I'm not saying which brother it was. Many of you also asked about the dark secrets Ted's mother supposedly forgave her sons for. I'll share only what's been openly discussed before. I won't name which brother did what, except for brother number 7, since I already told his story. So here's what I know. Brothers 1 to 4 were the classic golden boys, smart, athletic, high-achieving. That set the bar ridiculously high for the younger ones. The family expected every child to excel in school, sports, get a scholarship because paying for 10 college educations wasn't realistic, and build a successful career. But brother number 7 wanted none of that. He's a smart guy, but thought it was unfair that his life had to be a constant competition with his siblings. After high school, he told his parents he was going abroad to study culinary arts. His scholarship supposedly covered part of his tuition, but not housing. His parents were thrilled. Their son was going to become a world-famous chef.
They agreed to help with expenses as long as he kept good grades and cooked at family gatherings. In reality, he moved to New York, shared an apartment with 4 roommates, and pretended to live abroad. This was before video calls were common, so it wasn't hard to pull off. He just needed to call his parents at times that matched the time zone difference. He even made up stories for family holidays. His parents sent him money for tuition and rent, but he invested it and eventually made a decent profit. Years later, he returned to the West Coast claiming he was managing restaurants. The truth came out only when one of the nieces said she wanted to apply to the same school and asked him about it. By then, he was already financially stable, so there weren't major consequences. And to be fair, the man can really cook. He still handles Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners. Now, for the rest of the family drama, things I learned from Ted, his mom, or the brothers themselves, and for whom none of them were ever punished. Stealing and completely wrecking at least 2 cars, the same brother, both times. Another brother also stole a car. Leaving their grandmother alone for a week even though they were supposed to care for her. Stealing and selling things from their own home. Fistfights that ended with police involvement. Other fights that didn't involve police but did end with hospital visits. Skipping major school events, stealing trip money, or pocketing class funds. Public nudity, indecent behavior, and urinating in public, apparently a family tradition. One stalking incident that ended with a restraining order. Frequent teenage drinking and underage drunk driving. As for their father, last time I saw him, he was in an urn on his mother's mantle, hopefully still there. In life, he was an awful, misogynistic, abusive husband and father. Somehow, though, he managed to act like a decent grandpa. And before anyone judges, why did you let the kids near him? That's not on me. I don't have children. Ted's siblings do. Ted's parents were, and his mother still is, very traditional. They only ever cared about appearances, the image of a perfect family, with proud sons and beautiful daughters. I'm not excusing them, but losing their daughters really broke them and the whole family dynamic. As for why they had more kids after that, they desperately wanted another girl. They tried twice more, then couldn't have children anymore. I don't know if they would have kept trying or if the infertility made things emotionally worse. As for Ash, I honestly don't know how he's doing. I'd love to say I don't care, but I do a little. Therapy has made me more empathetic, and I can see that he's a sick person. I just hope he gets better, far, far away from me. And that's pretty much everything I can tell you about Ted's family. Big shout out to brother number 6, though. He's been supportive throughout all of this. Still single, by the way, and made me promise to mention that. So if anyone on the West Coast is looking for a kind, attractive doctor from an absolutely bonkers family, here's your chance. As for me, things are still rough. I had to quit my second job after already leaving the first one. So yeah, I'm unemployed and living with my parents right now. But my dad says he doesn't care as long as I'm okay, and I love him for that. I'm still going to therapy. It's the one thing keeping me grounded these days.
I showed my husband a silly joke. He got angry and left. Then I found out he'd been cheating on me for a long time. Hi everyone. I usually just scroll through Instagram, so this is my first time posting here. Honestly, I never thought I'd be the one writing something like this, especially since my husband, 30 male, and me, 27 female, always had what I thought was a perfect marriage. Sure, we had small arguments like everyone else, but overall, everything seemed great. We got married in April 2021, and life since then had been smooth, until a few days ago. That afternoon, we came home from a lunch with some friends, let's call them Kai and Marie, who recently got engaged.
It was just a casual lunch, nothing dramatic. We even brought home some amazing pasta, which I'm eating right now because it's too cold for ice cream. We live in a tiny apartment. My husband went to shower first while I cleaned up the leftovers. When it was my turn, I showered, and afterward I squeezed out too much lotion. I rubbed it in, but there was still some left on my fingers, so I did what any totally reasonable adult would do. I drew a smiley face with little hair on my thumb. I proudly walked out of the bathroom giggling and said, "Look, it's the lotion man!" He didn't laugh. He just stared at my hand and blinked. I kept joking around, talking in a silly voice, saying random nonsense, trying to make him smile. But after a minute or two, he just stood up and walked out. I thought he was still joking, so I laughed and asked where he was going. But he grabbed his truck keys and left. He always keeps his pickup stocked after road trips, clothes, snacks, everything, so it didn't immediately hit me that he was really leaving. When I finally realized, I felt like the biggest idiot alive. I texted him several times. He replied once, saying he needed to think things over and that he was staying with his brother, Tyler. Since then, he hasn't answered or even read my messages. His brother isn't replying either. I've just been sitting here, staring at the door, replaying everything over and over. We've been together for years. I've always been a little goofy, it's part of who I am, and he's always found it cute. Now I feel like an idiot for making that stupid lotion man joke and not realizing something was off. He's never left the house like that before, even during hard times. I'm trying to give him space, but I can't stop overthinking. Divorce sounds like a nightmare. I keep asking myself, was my dumb little lotion joke really that bad? How do I even begin to fix this? Update 1. I followed your advice and gave him space. Reading your comments made me question how accurate my idea of our perfect marriage really was. I still believe we were good together, but maybe I missed something. Anyway, some of you were right. It wasn't really about the lotion man, but you were also partly wrong. Something did happen during that lunch with our friends. My husband came back a couple of days ago. He apologized and said he wanted to talk. I agreed. I missed him so much, even though I tried not to show it. He told me the whole story. So we had lunch with our friends, Kai, 30 male, and Marie, 29 female. They'd just gotten engaged. It was a buffet-style restaurant, so people kept getting up for food. At some point, my husband and Marie went together, or maybe it was near the end. I remember chatting with Kai alone for a while before they came back. Either way, they were alone briefly. Marie apparently confessed to my husband that when Kai proposed, she realized she was actually in love with him. But she still said yes to Kai and tried to suppress her feelings. That's why she invited us to lunch, as some kind of closure. But instead of closure, she told my husband she wanted to run away with him. Marie is annoyingly gorgeous, blonde, blue-eyed, tall, and thin like a runway model. Think Emma Watson, but colder. I hate how much that bothers me. My husband said he politely turned her down and wished her well, but admitted that her confession messed with his head. We all went to college together, so we've known each other for years. When I came out of the shower later that day, laughing with a towel on my head and making silly jokes with the lotion man, he said something in him just snapped. According to him, my immaturity in that moment clashed with how mature and graceful Marie had seemed. It triggered some sort of emotional panic about our marriage, so he ran off to his brother's place. He claims that after a few days apart, he realized how much he loved me and came home. I just stared at him in disbelief. I asked a few questions, then told him to sleep on the couch for the night. He agreed. I didn't sleep at all. I still can't believe he almost threw away our marriage over some emotional fantasy with a woman who's engaged. The more I think about it, the harder it is to even look at him. We've since had Thanksgiving dinner with his family and even spent a night together again. I think he believes everything is fine now, and honestly, part of me wants to forgive and move on, just to feel normal again. But I don't know what to do next. He'll be home from work in about 6 hours. I'm a teacher, so I have the day off, and my brain's been spinning with options all morning. A.
tell Kai what his fiancée did. My husband begged me not to, saying Marie just had a moment of weakness. B. Contact Marie directly, either to confront her or to have a calm talk, though that sounds unlikely. C. Call Tyler, my husband's brother, and ask if my husband ever really stayed with him. His house is uncomfortably close to Marie's, and that makes me nervous. Or D. Do all of the above. I honestly don't know what I'll do yet. I showed my husband a silly joke. He got angry, walked out, and never came back. Turns out he'd been cheating on me for a long time. Hi everyone, I usually just scroll through Instagram, so this is my first time posting here. Honestly, I never thought I'd be the one writing something like this, especially since my husband, 30 male, and me, 27 female, always had what I thought was a perfect marriage. Sure, we had small arguments like everyone else, but overall, everything seemed great. We got married in April 2021, and life since then had been smooth, until a few days ago. That afternoon, we came home from a lunch with some friends. Let's call them Kai and Marie, who recently got engaged. It was just a casual lunch, nothing dramatic. We even brought home some amazing pasta, which I'm eating right now because it's too cold for ice cream. We live in a tiny apartment. My husband went to shower first while I cleaned up the leftovers. When it was my turn, I showered, and afterward, I squeezed out too much lotion. I rubbed it in, but there was still some left on my fingers, so I did what any totally reasonable adult would do. I drew a smiley face with little hair on my thumb. I proudly walked out of the bathroom giggling and said, "Look, it's the lotion man!" He didn't laugh. He just stared at my hand and blinked. I kept joking around, talking in a silly voice, saying random nonsense, trying to make him smile. But after a minute or two, he just stood up and walked out. I thought he was still joking, so I laughed and asked where he was going, but he grabbed his truck keys and left. He always keeps his pickup stocked after road trips, clothes, snacks, everything, so it didn't immediately hit me that he was really leaving. When I finally realized, I felt like the biggest idiot alive. I texted him several times. He replied once, saying he needed to think things over and that he was staying with his brother, Tyler. Since then, he hasn't answered or even read my messages. His brother isn't replying either. I've just been sitting here, staring at the door, replaying everything over and over. We've been together for years. I've always been a little goofy, it's part of who I am, and he's always found it cute. Now I feel like an idiot for making that stupid lotion man joke and not realizing something was off. He's never left the house like that before, even during hard times. I'm trying to give him space, but I can't stop overthinking. Divorce sounds like a nightmare. I keep asking myself, was my dumb little lotion joke really that bad? How do I even begin to fix this?
First update. I followed the advice people gave me and gave him space, but reading everyone's comments made me think, maybe our perfect marriage wasn't as perfect as I believed. And turns out you were right about something happening during that lunch. My husband came back a couple of days later, apologized, and said he wanted to talk. He told me that while I was chatting with Kai, Marie had confessed to him that she was in love with him and had been since college. She said she'd accepted Kai's proposal hoping the feelings would fade, but seeing my husband again brought everything back. She even asked him to leave me for her. He said he turned her down and wished her well, but he admitted that the confession messed with his head, that he started comparing us. Marie was beautiful, confident, and composed. Meanwhile, I'd been goofing around in a towel, laughing about a lotion face. He said it made him suddenly question our whole relationship, and that's why he panicked and left. I was speechless. He said he realized how stupid it was and that he still loved me. I told him to sleep on the couch. Since then, he's been acting like everything's fine again, but I can't unhear what he said, that another woman's confession made him doubt me. I don't know if I can ever look at him the same way. He thinks we can just move on, but I'm torn. Part of me still loves him. Another part wants to scream. I've been thinking about telling Kai what Marie did, but my husband begged me not to, saying she just made a mistake. I'm not sure I believe that. Second update. Thank you all so much for the love and support.
Seriously, I didn't expect such kindness. My last post was deleted, but here's what happened since. I took your advice. I talked to everyone involved, Kai, Marie, my husband, and Tyler. What I found out completely shattered me. When I met with Kai, I told him everything I knew. He was skeptical at first, then broke down crying. Turns out Marie had told him nothing. Together, we went to confront her. At first, she denied everything. Then she snapped. The truth came out, and it was so much worse than I imagined. My husband wasn't innocent. He was the one who'd started everything. He had suggested to Marie that before she officially married Kai, the three of them, him, Marie, and another woman, should spend a night together, and Marie had agreed. Apparently, this wasn't new. She'd been cheating on Kai for years, with both men and women, and my husband had been cheating on me just as long. They covered for each other. Marie said she backed out of that threesome idea at the last minute because she wanted to be faithful now that she was engaged. My husband got angry, and not long after, I showed him the lotion man. He snapped, left, and ran off. Later, I spoke with Tyler. He said my husband came over around 11 p.m. and left at 8 a.m., meaning there were about 3 unaccounted hours. He guessed my husband might have just driven around to clear his head, but that didn't sound like him. That night, when my husband fell asleep early, I went through his phone. At first, nothing. Then I found a hidden folder, and there they were, dozens of nudes. Not mine, not Marie's either, from another woman. Let's call her Allison. Stunning redhead, hourglass figure. Their messages went back to February, right before Valentine's Day, when I was planning a surprise for him. She didn't even know he was married until recently. When she found out, she was furious. And here's the part that made me sick. My husband told her he would bring me to a hotel to prove that I was okay with their affair. Sound familiar? It was the same idea he'd pitched to Marie. After that, I couldn't even pretend anymore. The next morning, I packed my things. He cried, begged, swore he loved only me, blamed his weakness for redheads, said I was the only one that mattered. I told him it was over. The apartment's in his name, so I left. Right now, I'm staying with Kai. He's heartbroken too. We both are. I don't know what comes next, divorce, therapy, or just trying to survive this. But at least now I know the truth. His fiancée meant everything to him. We sat together for a long time, hugging, crying, saying all kinds of nonsense, just trying to hold ourselves together. He tried to cheer me up and made lunch. It turned out great. He's an amazing cook. I showed him my 2 previous posts, and he laughed at some of your comments. As far as I know, my almost ex-husband is now with Marie. I don't care about them. Honestly, it even feels kind of nice, like a chapter has finally closed, and I don't have to tiptoe around anymore like I did these past few days. Tomorrow, Kai and I are going to the gym for yoga, to relax and maybe figure out what to do next. We both took a day off, and I'm sorting out my finances. I hope to start the divorce process soon so I can finally call him my ex. I'm still a complete mess. My desk is still covered with our photos, and our wedding picture is still the wallpaper on all my devices. I know my students will notice his sudden disappearance from my life, and I'll have to tell them that the guy I used to talk so much about is now divorcing me. I'll have to tell my family and friends too, the ones who are my main support right now. It hurts to realize that eventually Kai and I will have to move out separately because he's the only real support I have in this whole mess. Housing, divorce expenses, lawyers, therapy. Sigh, so much ahead. It's hard to believe I once thought this relationship was perfect. Anyway, thank you all so much. I've already written about how much support I've received here, but honestly, your sincerity and kindness, without exaggeration, saved my life. I would have kept living with that cheater otherwise, and Kai too. This community is incredible. So many kind people who care, follow my story, and wish me well. I'll definitely come back for advice again, but please know I've read everything. Yes, everything, and I've seen all your kind words. Author's note. I've been scrolling through the comments for a while now,
and honestly, I'm amazed at how many people responded to my story. There's a lot I need to clarify, so here we go. Not much has changed. It's only been a week since my last update. My husband and I briefly talked about the upcoming divorce. That's all. I'm still healing, working, and slowly getting back to myself. Ask me again in a year, maybe I'll be better then. As for Allison, the mistress, I still haven't been able to contact her, though some of your advice really inspired me to try again. And about Kai and me? I know many of you are discussing this, so I'll clarify right away. Kai and I are rebuilding our friendship. Honestly, I don't think we'd work as a couple. Kai wants a calm and independent life for two, while I dream of having kids. He admitted that he has a very low libido, one of the reasons he blames himself for everything that happened, and mine, on the contrary, is high. Plus, now we're more like brother and sister. Still, thank you for worrying about my options. I'm not ready to date yet, and probably won't be for a while. This story is fake. Gotcha! Just kidding. I wish it were fake. No hurts on you if you don't believe me. Not everything on the internet can be trusted, and I doubt I can convince you otherwise. But unfortunately, yes, I live in this reality, and no hate messages will change that. About family, friends, students, and so on. My family is of course on my side. Most of our mutual friends, too. Yes, I told my students everything, and you know what? They were incredibly supportive. I've already cleared my desk of all reminders of him. The next step is to clear my head of that lotion-scented man. I tried to recreate his look as best I could. I'll post a photo on my profile soon. Edit, there he is. If I missed something, let me know. There are so many comments. I haven't gone through all the new messages yet, and I'm really sorry I can't reply to everyone. I'm super busy right now, but I hope to catch up with some of you over the weekend.
Third update, the final one, Lotion Man Years Later. Oh God, that title is awful. Sorry, I'll come up with something better once my brain starts working again. It's that time of year, you know? Check in on your teacher friends if you have any. Hey everyone, it's been a long time, but I finally logged back into this account. And wow, I don't even know where to start. So much support, so many New Year wishes. It's just incredible. I love the internet sometimes. You were with me when I was at my lowest point. I've gotten dozens of messages asking how I've been, what's new, and even stories from people who went through almost the same thing. One girl said her boyfriend blamed everything on their new puppy. Seriously. She even sent a photo of that little fluff ball. It's crazy how such a painful experience turned out to be so common. Still, I haven't lost faith in humanity, thanks to the wave of love you've all given me. It's been almost 2 years now. It feels like an eternity ago and just yesterday. All right, to the point. Let's start with the bad news. Kai and I had a pretty big fight. I won't go into every detail, that would take about 30 pages, but long story short, we were roommates. We lived together, shared everything, chores, shopping, daily life. Whenever I went to the store, he knew. I knew when he got home from work. We were just always aware of each other's schedules because we lived side by side and ran a shared household. At some point, Kai told me he was going on a date. Cool, I was happy for him. I was still deep in the divorce process then, emotionally shattered, not thinking about relationships at all. Kai and Marie, since they never married, broke up a bit easier than I did, but it was still hard. He went on one date, then another, and that was it. A week passed without news, so I asked, what happened? He just said she was ghosting him. Then, a week later, out of nowhere, he dropped a bombshell. He was dating Marie. I know, sounds insane, right? But he told me this while sitting on the couch crying like a kid. And I couldn't even be mad. I just felt sorry for him. It's not easy to recover from broken relationships. He said those dates made him realize that everything between them really was over for good. He described it like this, or close to it. When I first met Marie, she seemed like a sweet, polite girl next door, like a cashier with a kind smile. But as I got to know her, I found out she was fun and free-spirited. That's what I fell for. And when I saw her again recently, it felt like she'd reset to factory settings. That hit him hard, like he'd gone full circle for nothing. After 2 dates, he He didn't just ghost her, he blocked her everywhere. It was a bit hard for me to listen to. It reminded me way too much of my own situation, but I tried not to dwell on it and just comforted him. For a few months after that, everything was calm. During that time, Kai turned me into a total gym girl. It's funny rereading my old posts, how skeptical I was about the gym back then. Anyway, after a few peaceful months, Kai had news again. He was going on another date, this time with a friend of a friend. I said the usual, great, go for it. I was still angry at the world, still legally married, so I wasn't thinking about new relationships. As I mentioned, Kai and I unintentionally kept tabs on each other because of how we lived. So when he started leaving home at 2 p.m. and returning at 8 p.m., his dates lasting hours, of course I noticed. I didn't say anything. I figured maybe he was just smitten, which made sense. But his absences were pretty noticeable. He even asked me to do little errands for him because he knew he wouldn't have time due to his long outings. Eventually, I met the girl. Her name was Grace. She was in her 20s, very sweet, and also a teacher. She worked in an elementary school, but we still had a lot to talk about. At that point, everything seemed perfect. Kai and Grace were adorable together. Summer went by peacefully. Everything felt stable. I had just officially finalized my divorce. But damn, those dates were endless. Even the short ones lasted 3 or 4 hours. He would just disappear. So I finally decided to bring it up carefully. Kai said Grace usually picked the meeting spots herself, places 1 or 2 hours away with traffic. When I asked where Grace actually lived, maybe they were meeting halfway, he calmly said, I don't really know. That's when alarm bells went off in my head. Maybe I've read too many infidelity forums, but something about it felt off. Grace couldn't have lived that far away. She was friends with one of our mutual acquaintances. They'd been dating for months. She'd even had dinner at our place more than once, and yet he didn't know where she lived and all their meetings happened miles away. Suspicious much? So yeah, I probably crossed the line. I searched her name on Instagram and boom, Grace in a wedding dress with some guy named Mike. The post was from 2019. She was married. I shot up from bed and ran straight to wake Kai up. Yes, I know, total idiot move. It was midnight. He had work at 7 a.m. and there I was, waving my phone in his face like a lunatic. When I finally stopped rambling, Kai exploded. He went from groggy to furious in 2 seconds flat. He started yelling at me for invading his privacy, demanding why the hell I was snooping in his relationship. When I tried to explain my concerns, he got even angrier. Within minutes, it turned into a full-blown shouting match. He accused me of crossing every possible line, which honestly was partially true, but we lived together, always knowing what was going on in each other's lives. I asked him why he was mad if I was just worried about him. He fired back that I was obsessed with him, that we'd long felt like our friendship had crossed the line, and that's why I was stalking him. That's when I lost it completely. I said things I regret, brought up Marie and told him I wouldn't date him for $1 million. He started yelling back, calling me names. It was ugly. Eventually, I stormed out. The next morning, he woke me up before work. I thought he'd cooled off, maybe even come to apologize, but instead, he dropped a bomb. He knew. He'd known Grace was married almost from the start, but didn't care. Apparently, her husband was a good guy, but Grace told Kai she didn't feel anything for him anymore, so he just went along with it.
I was stunned. I asked how he'd feel if Marie's lovers knew she was engaged and still slept with her. He got defensive again, shouting at me not to bring up Marie. We argued, not as loud as the night before, but still heated. He said he'd kept it secret because he knew I'd make a scene. I told him that cheating was a deep wound for me, and I'd expected it to be the same for him. But he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "It's not." Then he added that living with me was already like being in a relationship, and that I had no right to interfere in his personal life. That one really hit hard. I said, "Fine, date whoever you want. I just wanted you to know you're helping someone cheat." He shrugged, said he didn't care, and left for work. I wasn't his mother, I couldn't control him, but I thought he deserved to know he'd become the other man. If I were in his place, I'd want someone to tell me the truth, and if someone told me my partner was cheating, I'd end it instantly.
But Kai's moral compass, it seems, worked differently. We kept living together for a bit, but the atmosphere became cold and strained. I lost respect for him. He still saw grace, and worse, seemed convinced I had feelings for him. Eventually, I packed my things and moved in with a friend. It turned out to be the best decision, even though it was far from work. As for my ex-husband, not long after the divorce was finalized, he got engaged to another woman. Right after I'd moved out, I hit rock bottom. There was chaos at school over AI and student essays. I was trying to build a new life in a place where I knew no one, and the loneliness was eating me alive. I tried a few dates, but they were all so mediocre I gave up, which somehow made the loneliness worse. And just when I thought things couldn't get any bleaker, my ex reached out. He told me about his engagement, his new life, and how happy he was. Said he was working on self-improvement and wanted to apologize in person. He promised it wasn't a date, that he expected nothing from me. I should have said no, but I was emotionally drained, and the idea of closure sounded like relief. So I agreed. At first, it was civil. We exchanged small talk. He even gave a genuine apology. But then he started asking questions. How was I doing? Was I seeing anyone? And when he realized I wasn't doing great, that smirk appeared, that same smug Cheshire grin I'd seen before. He started bragging about his new fiancée, about how beautiful she was, about how amazing his life had become. Then he said, honestly, our breakup was a blessing in disguise. It felt like a knife in my chest, all those years I'd given him, and he called them a burden. Eventually, I made some excuse and left. I wasn't invited to the wedding, obviously, and I regretted agreeing to meet him at all. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. After months of dragging myself through the days, I finally went on another date. That's when I met Chase, 29, bright, kind, a total goofball. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. I used to think I needed a brooding, mysterious man to balance my energy. But here's my advice. If you're a sunny person, don't look for someone dark to complete you. Find someone who shines with you. Chase makes me laugh every day. There are no fake conversations, no one-sided love, just two weird, happy people being completely themselves. We joke, we dream, we build new memories, and life finally feels alive again. Now it's 2025. I've got my own place near work. I even started going back to my old gym. And of course, that's where I saw Kai again. He didn't notice me first, but when he did, he came right up, apologized sincerely, and said he regretted how things ended. Told me he'd be glad if we could talk again someday. Maybe we will, maybe not. Honestly, he feels like a character from the first movie who suddenly shows up in the sequel, someone from a chapter that's long since closed. My life now feels completely different. With Chase, with my own home, with peace and laughter. Well, except for one thing. The lotion man. Yes, I finally showed Chase the infamous drawing. My hands were shaking, but I did it. He burst out laughing so hard he cried. Now it's become our little tradition. We've got the soap man, the ketchup man, the cream man, even the floor man. Don't ask. Everything with a doodled face becomes a character, and each has a ridiculous accent. And honestly, it's perfect. Life moves on. We heal, we grow, we laugh again. And the best part, I've stopped apologizing for who I am. Because if you shine too bright for the box you're in, the problem isn't your light, it's the box. So get out of it. I'll never apologize again for being myself.